One of the things I always say, and I was saying this to our client friend Celia earlier, I surround myself with people who are smarter than me. And that's why LDPR is successful, because just when you think you know it, you don't, right? So luckily, I've got Jackie Becker on my team, who is not just a superstar account executive, but is also our digital media strategist, and has put this whole thing together with our fabulous colleagues at Thin Pig Media. And we've got our staff, we've got clients, we have some media friends with us here, and we have a lot of people who are logging in remotely. I hope I look okay on YouTube. I didn't really do the hair today. So thank you to everybody who is logging in today throughout the day for these presentations. It's going to be very exciting, really good brain food, as well as some good actual food here at the Dominic Hotel, which is an LDPR client and our host hotel, and is fabulous. I stayed here last night. You can see the view from my room and Instagram. Anyway, let's get it started. I'm going to turn it over to Jackie to take it over.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Laura mentioned, this is our second annual Social Media Summit, and we're really excited to have everyone here today. We're going to be talking about a few trends, looking ahead as to what you need to know for next year, and then we're going to go into social media advertising as well as influencer marketing, what we need to know. Just a few mentions of who will be here today to present. We have our lovely digital affiliate team, Thin Pig Media, who are sitting in the front row over here working away. We have Ben, who'll be presenting with me, and then we have Andy, and we have Sean and Catherine, and Greg will be joining us shortly as well. And then we have a few presenters. We'll let you guys know who they are towards the panel sections of this, but please feel free to grab any coffee over there. And we also have some water and some drinks, and we'll have a fun interactive lunch session, so we'll kind of bring that up as well as that proceeds and goes on. Without further ado, Ben, please come and join me.
Oh, hi.
And one thing we wanted to, just a little bit, thank you. One thing we wanted to say was today the event hashtag is LDPR Gets Social. So if you flip over your agendas, which you have right in front of you, we have a fun bingo card. Now this bingo card is something where you can be interactive with us as we use the hashtag. And ways you can do it, we have a geo filter, we have share a trend intel that you're learning from this presentation. We have just different ways to interact with us or tell us that you're here. So we'd love for you to use the hashtag, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook even, and we'll be monitoring and checking through. We have a few Q&A sections towards the end of the presentation as well. So if you have anything, feel free to tweet it out, and our team will be able to answer your questions that way, or we'll answer it during our Q&A session later on this afternoon.
And we've got some sweet little prizes for people who contribute to that bingo card.
The first 3 people to fill out 10 of those boxes will get 2 really exciting prizes. We won't tell you what they are until the very end of this.
And you'll see there's a couple of duplicates on there, so feel free to try each one multiple times if you like. You'll get the points.
Great. So we want to do a little bit of introductory, and let's catch up and do something quickly and fun. So, what is the most popular hashtag of 2018 so far? Any guesses?
Manga.
Good one.
MAGA, Make America Great Again.
Well, the most popular hashtag of 2018 is actually love, which had 693,000 times shared on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all across social.
Also happens to be what the world needs now.
Absolutely. What's the most active platform of 2018 so far?
Besides this one. Snapchat.
Instagram. Andy, what is it? It's actually Facebook. Facebook is still one of the leaders to this date, just because there's so many people engaging on it. And Instagram is closely behind it, but Facebook continues to be the leader in the space. Who had the most engaged posts of 2018 so far? It's a good guess.
Yeah, Kim Kardashian.
You are close to the Kardashians. And the winner is Kylie Jenner with the announcement of her baby.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the Landisca op-ed on social media today. this is a fact thanks to ComScore. 1 out of every 5 minutes is spent on a social network, including a lot of the minutes out here, as I see a lot of people, rightfully so, checking on their phones. 80% of the social media traffic is via mobile. So there are still a lot of people who are using desktop for things like Facebook, but obviously Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat all work a whole lot better, or at all, on mobile, and the Facebook apps are crushing it as well. So this, I like this graph. This is a distribution of US population. So we see here Facebook crushing it as usual. They've got 82% of people 18 to 29 are using it. A lot of people, younger people on Facebook, are using it to share third-party content instead of more personal info. They're using other sites like Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat for more personal communication, updates about life. Really happy to see Pinterest with such a large share of really all 4 age groups. 16% of people over 65 getting a lot out of Pinterest. And then LinkedIn, we're seeing, understandably, a higher share of people between 30 and 64 using it for business. And Instagram, there's your proof right there. The young people are on the Instagrams. So we feel, both LDPR and ThinPig Media feel like the point of participating in social media, especially from the brand perspective, is not just to say, hey, us too, because there's so much content out there. You know, we could show data from all around the world about just how much is already out there, but you see it on a regular basis. The point we feel like is to stand out. It's to not just call attention to yourself like everybody else does, but find a reason that other people should ignore the rest of the noise and zero in on what you're doing. So here's a couple of examples from each of us. ThinPig Media does have its own mascot here. We call it the Piglet, and we actually take it on client visits with us. I think we have a Piglet with us this week.
And if you want to hear the story behind it, feel free to ask on the ThinPig Media later on during the lunch session.
Absolutely. So we've got, when we go on trips, and we give these to our clients as well, so they take them around and take different photos of Piglet participating in various things. And we feel like this is a way to not just say, hey, we're an agency, but really to give more reason to follow us, more reason to engage with us.
On the LDPR side, we have so many amazing clients. So for us, what's really been working is video content, as well as really beautiful backdrops of photos that we're able to share on our channels. That gets the most likes, it gets the most engagement, and it really gets people to go not only to our social channels, but to our clients' websites as a result of that. So just a few ideas to kind of make yourself stand out in this crowd. We know that everybody is on social media nowadays, so how do you make yourself and your brand be a bold personality in the space? So you can do it a couple of ways. A few ideas is you can do a sassy humor to your content, so it's not just strictly, we were here, we were doing this. It's a fun play. You can play on the words, add in a few puns, make it a little bit more engaging so that people can relate to it. Another idea is to be able to take a stand. Now, we don't mean a political stand, we just mean know what your brand stands for and the identity of it, and find ways you can incorporate that into your content. So whether you're a firm believer in being sustainable, or if you're a firm believer in making sure that your children have equal rights, or whatever it is, finding ways to engage that as part of your content as well. And a few examples of that are Wendy's and Patagonia. So real quickly on the Wendy's front, they realized early on that a lot of the other competitors were really just posting normal photos of their products. And so what Wendy's did was really insert themselves in these fun conversations that had nothing to do with Wendy's. Whether it's people asking them for advice on what's the best way to enter into a relationship, or just find new ways to have conversations with people, Wendy's inserted themselves in a fun and unique way that drove people to their site as well. Now, Patagonia is an example of where they stood for something. They were really involved in the Bears Ears National Monument. They wanted to make sure that it was preserved and protected. So as part of their whole campaign, they created these video series that was dedicated to that, that included their product, but messaging was to help save and preserve this space.
So I'm sure you guys have heard the news in the last couple of years that video is huge and only getting huger on both desktop and especially on mobile. So I'm a big fan of stats. I hope you guys are too. We have a good amount of data in this presentation. We're hoping that it not only is food for thought for you, but that you can take these stats and use them in your business. There are definitely ways to, if there's people that don't quite understand the power of social or video, we find that there's a lot of great facts that can help people really understand. So we have here 500 million people are watching Facebook videos every day. That's crazy. A third of the time that people spend online is devoted to watching videos. 74% of all internet traffic is video. That was in 2017. By next year, they're predicting that 80% of all internet traffic will come from video. And by 2021, they're predicting that all internet traffic will consist of live video, which is a huge growth over just a couple of years ago when live video was like only for a select handful of YouTube users or Periscope. We feel like there's a lot of momentum growing in the way people are shopping, and that video is helping people make buying decisions, and 90% of customers saying that that's so. There are 4 times more buyers that prefer to watch a video about a product rather than just read about it. That's absolutely true for me. We see that there's a digital marketing expert named James McQuivey, and he says that 1 minute of video is the equivalent of 1.8 million words. So, you know, the old adage now, there's a new adage for video, it's 1.8 million. So when you start to think about, okay, yeah, but what does my brand do on video? How can we engage? How can we start to create some things? It doesn't necessarily mean you got to pull in a really expensive production crew and make a whole, you know, cinematic extravaganza. We thought we'd offer a few tips here. Think about it in terms of clips and stories, not commercials and movies. There was a time when, you know, you wanted to have a 1.5-minute video on the home page of your website explaining everything, and now it's much, much more popular and much more engaging to have a short clip that just shows you one thing, or a few clips in a row that show you a story, a progression. The best length, honestly, is between 3 seconds and 20 seconds. Even 20 is on the long side right now. So when you're looking at statistics, you can go into your insights and see who's viewing your videos and for how long are they viewing it. Really, the attention span is just a couple of seconds unless you have something really engaging. We are big fans of utilizing little tools like GIFs. You can create a GIF in many different websites online by just having one little clip that just starts repeating. Boomerangs, the little clips that go forward and backward, they're very fun. Really big on Instagram. And time-lapse. A lot of companies, maybe they don't do something that is the most exciting right there in the moment, but there's a process to it. That if you just use a little time-lapse setting or download an app that does time-lapse, it becomes all of a sudden really interesting for people online. So we just like to think of it as, make sure you have a beginning, middle, and end. You have stories that you can tell, and video can help you tell them. So this is about sound and no sound. So something to consider when you're creating videos is that 85% of users watch videos with the sound off. They scroll through the feed, they don't necessarily click on the little screen or the little mute button. People watch videos for 12% longer if it has subtitles or captions. So you want to, you can place those in the video file before you upload it, or you can, Facebook has a really nice feature where you can manually type in, or they'll automatically add them and you can go in and fix them. But when you're thinking about what do you want to show in your video, try to make it something that people can understand and keep up with without necessarily having the sound on. And we've got good old advice from the Zuck. Live video gives people more intimate and raw environments where you have a reason to just be yourself. It doesn't need to feel like it's super curated. So now we're getting into live video. Live video, a couple examples on the left here, people who are cooking, people who are showing off what they're doing at home. The trends right now are that actions are speaking louder than words. So we believe that the time has kind of gone to just show a talking head explaining something. You can have a voiceover, you can have little clips of interviews, but focus on the action of what's happening. And you'd be surprised, maybe you don't think that what's happening in your business is necessarily the most exciting, but if you're showing what is really happening, chances are it will be engaging. Live video really helps brands show off their personality. If they can say, here's what's happening in the moment. They can give a peek behind the scenes. You know, there's a lot of people that are interested in how things work. And so again, even if to you it's just the day in, day out, why would someone really find this interesting? Chances are, if you are giving them the access to what's happening behind the scenes, they will find it interesting. Facebook Live, just to give you further incentive, Facebook absolutely gives it priority in the organic news feed, so without even putting money into these posts, Facebook is going to show it in more people's feeds than a regular pre-recorded video or a photo or a just text post. Users currently are spending, according to Facebook, 3 times longer watching live video than regular video, and that they're producing 10 times more comments, and a lot of that is because if you're shooting live video and you're streaming in the moment, people who are commenting are actually engaging with the video creator as it's happening. So this is great for Q&As or a premiere of something, or you can go live and say, hey, what do you people think about this? And then collect the comments and respond to them in real time. Couple of tips for live video. You don't necessarily just want to go live right away without any warning. If you want to make the most out of it, do a few posts on different channels saying, Thursday 9 a.m. we're going live, get ready. You know, mark it on your calendar or make sure you're online. You will get little notifications if you're a follower of those pages that, hey, they've just gone live. But building buzz is really important to get more views and more interaction. You want to, you know, if you're following a broadcast, you want to be editing your subtitles, so that's something that you can do after the live broadcast is over. You go back, you can edit subtitles so that people are still seeing it even if they weren't there to watch it live. And just for the people who want to give this a try, we've got a couple of suggestions for the best equipment. On the left, we have it for desktop, if you want to run it off of a laptop or another monitor. And on the right, a few ideas for people who want to use it on mobile. You don't need a whole lot. The audio that we suggest here, a video mic, is definitely helpful for, you know, outdoor where things are noisier, or if there's a bunch of, you know, things happening in the background. But honestly, if you just want to try out video, you have a phone, and that will absolutely get you a lot of the way there.
So how do we take that and put that into Instagram stories? As we know, this is such a big part of our social media channels right now, and everyone is using it as we move forward. So as you can see, we have a few examples up here from Starbucks and from Sydney, Australia, and a few things that the people are doing, and as Ben mentioned, people don't have the sound on most of the time. So it's really important to make sure that not only the picture is engaging, but the content you're putting with it is engaging as well. You don't want to fill up the entire page with content and text and be able to hide the picture. You want people to see what you want to do, actions that will speak louder than words, and really get them to be engaging with Instagram stories. So you'll see right here on the left side of it, the 5 best places in the world to start a business. So Sydney, Australia was one of the places they spotlighted, but they also included a customized link, as you'll see over there. So that's a way for people to drive engagement not only on your Instagram channels, but also to your website as well. So Instagram Live, this is another opportunity for your brand to be able to speak to your followers and the people who are really a part of engaging with you as well. One really great tip, real quickly, going back to Instagram Live, is you don't have to make sure it's fully curated. You can have a pretty good background. You can kind of make it seem like it's more engaging by being real. You don't have to put on full makeup, you know, you don't have to have it be set up with a photo booth or with a microphone or anything like that. Just be real with your followers, and I think that will be more engaging and get more people to be work with you as well on your social channels. So Instagram shoppable. This is something we're starting to see as a big trend going into this year, and we see a lot of not only hotels and travel destinations, but also products that are using Instagram shoppable. This is coming from Facebook and their shop as well, and we can use third platforms including Shopify and a few other items, but really it's a way for you to sell your products on Instagram and on Facebook by tagging it and then having that be directed to your website.
So Snapchat, not just for the youngsters anymore. There are lots and lots of brands participating on Snapchat. Currently 191 million active users. That is up from 150 last year. So it is still a growing space, approaching the same levels as a lot of the other major channels. 37% of those users are aged 18 to 24. So this is where those people are spending a lot of their time in addition to Instagram. And the stat that they gave us is 10+ billion videos are viewed on Snapchat every single day. There is a fun anecdote from in the last year. Our most popular poster, Kylie Jenner, uses Snapchat a lot, followed very closely by millions of people, but she tweeted one day after they did an update to their system, "So does anyone else not open Snapchat anymore, or is it just me? Ugh, this is so sad." And this is not great for Snapchat. This ended up lowering the shares in their parent company as much as 8.5%, and the stock closed by 6% at the end of that Thursday. So these are celebrities with an enormous following that do have a big impact on the channel. That said, Snapchat is still very popular and still used by many, many people.
One particular feature with Snapchat is you can create geo-filters. So we'll showcase that later on today for this particular event. But just an example of how we used it in the past. So this was a Comic-Con event where they set a geo-filter in a certain location that the event would take place. And what's really great is they got a ton of engagement from it, and they also got a lot of the ROI as a result of the amount that they spent. It was a really great way to get people with a custom filter, which you can create by yourself, and then have your logo and also the logo of the event also and the hashtag. But it's also a great way to have everyone be part of the conversation and have it be able to be trackable as well. So we wanted to also say that we also have a geo-filter for today's event. As you'll see, this is our first run of it. But feel free, if you do have Snapchat, feel free to share as well. We have a custom filter for today throughout the event as well. So augmented reality, we're starting to see this rise really big towards this year as well. It started to become big last year, but this year in particular, we're starting to see a lot of tourism companies, a lot of travel companies, and a lot of lifestyle accounts also be able to use that. So a few examples we have here is from Visit Orlando up top. They have on their app a destination guide where you can swipe through, hold your phone up, and be able to see what the restaurants and what the shopping centers around the area are without having to look up or pull up a map or anything like that. You'll have it all in your phone. Down here we have, from London, we have a few tips of here's where you can go, here's what the pricing is looking like, here's the traffic to be able to get there. And it's just a way to have people be engaged with the destination without having to go on TripAdvisor or anything like that. You can literally just pull it up, as I mentioned previously, and be able to show the guide and get a better understanding of what's happening. And then, of course, we also see some movies as well interact with this. So we have Star Wars over here when the new movie came out. They had Disney and a few other companies as well kind of have that on your phones with Google, and you're able to kind of have that come live. So if you have any kids who are interested in this, or if you're looking to incorporate some sort of activity at your hotel, this is one way you're able to do that.
So chatbots, these are getting pretty big. Chatbots are programs that you can customize to answer questions from customers, so it's a C2B way of communicating. You can program them rather to respond the exact same way to every inquiry that has the most commonly asked questions. You can customize it based on certain keywords that are used. In general, these are really great for brands because it it makes it possible to be able to interact 24 hours a day rather than having someone monitor your channels 24 hours a day. And it's great for customers because they get their questions answered right away. A few more stats, according to Facebook, who has chatbots that you can program through Messenger, there are 2 billion messages sent every month between personal users and businesses. 56% of those users would rather send a message to a business than to call them, so the days of picking up the phone and calling to find out a question starting to go away. 53% of those people are more likely to buy from a business that has a messaging service of some kind. So we've got a nice load of stats here. The most commonly used purposes for chatbots: getting a quick answer in an emergency specifically, so really last minute if it's a hotel reservation or if it's an issue with a certain device that might not be working, or hey, how do I get a hold of somebody? That's finding a human customer assistant, service assistant. That's 34% of those people. And the tip that we would recommend is, make sure not only that the information itself is accurate, because that's just going to backfire if it's not, but make sure that it is a unique engagement. So you don't just want to use the exact same copy that's on your website to answer the questions. You want to make it feel a little more conversational. You want to make it feel a little more authentic and engaging. Even though it is a chatbot, people respond more to the sense that the company has put some time and energy into this. And then we've got a couple of visual examples of what's out there right now. There are Domino's and Starbucks. You can place your order via a chatbot now. Estee Lauder will automatically help you find the perfect foundation for your skin. Whole Foods will give you specialized, customized recipes based on what you may have bought at the grocery store. And even TSA actually has a really popular chatbot that'll help you hopefully have a little less stress while you travel. They have a lot of very frequently asked questions, and they have a really great response time for that. A couple more stats. According to a recent survey, out of 200 executives, 75% of them said that they will be using artificial intelligence in some way in the next 3 years. By 2020, 80% of companies will have some kind of chatbot installed for customer service. So it's here to stay. 96% of those businesses think that chatbots are absolutely the way of the future. So it's something that we recommend you at least dip your toe into, try it out, because more and more people online are not just expecting to get a response sometime, they're expecting to get a response right away.
So we'll kind of speak to this later on as well. They want to put it on their radar. GDPR, does anybody know what that is? A few people? Okay. So this is a general data protection regulation. This is from the EU. It's something that's coming up, and again, we'll speak to this later on. But it's becoming big in its regulations and what we need to be able to make sure we include and not include, and so we'll speak to that later in one of our panels. And then just real quickly, jumping into influencers, we'll have an influencer marketing panel later on this afternoon, but we want to give you a few stats. So 49% of consumers rely on other people's recommendations in order to make a purchase. We also have 94% of marketers who use influencer marketing say that it's very effective and they need it to be able to move forward with their company as well. Influencer marketing has about 11 times higher ROI than just advertising alone, which is really important to know because as we start to move forward in this space, we really need to tap into our influencer contacts to see how they can leverage our brand's messagings and bring that to life.
So there are some things that we feel like are more important than others rising to the top as trends for this year and especially for next year. YouTube advertising is something that we're going to go over in the next panel, but YouTube is a great way to reach a lot of people, even if they only watch the first 5 seconds before that pleasurable experience of skipping the ad. On the same token, we feel like video is just going to continue getting more popular. We know that this has been said over the last couple of years, but it's no longer an eventuality. It's absolutely here, and it is growing. And third, we feel like there's increasing ways that businesses are providing for online users to be able to shop. So again, the days of learning about something on social media and then manually going to the internet some other time and going to the website or going in person, we feel like those connections, they can still happen, but more importantly, we're seeing more and more people who are shopping right from the social media channel, and they're starting to expect that.
And then the other few that we have outlined here is mobile still going to be very big as we move forward to not only the rest of 2018, but 2019 as well. Augmented reality filters, as we mentioned during the presentation, a lot of tourism companies are starting to include that as part of their apps or their travel websites. And then, of course, the continued use and increase of influencers as part of the whole brand strategy. So great. So now we're going to move on to our first panel, which is on social media advertising. So if I could please have the panelists come up here, and we'll start shortly. And if you want to grab a few bottles of water or coffee while we're kind of set up, please feel free to. Does anyone have any questions while we're getting a few coffees and waters? No questions yet. Okay.
Here. That's how you turn it on, right there.
You filled it out already? Oh, great.
When you're ready. That's understandable. I didn't think so. I was going to tell you you're not ready. I'm not ready. It's more trim.
Okay, so everybody's going to be settled in. I just want to introduce you to our panelists for today for the social media advertising panel. So over here we have Brooke Sellis, who is the owner of B Squared Media. We have Ben Rapson from Thin Pig Media. And then we have Sean McGath from Oblong Pixel. So let's start with Brooke. Why do people need social media advertising to be a part of a social media strategy?
I mean, I think for the most part people know this now, but many of the social platforms are now pay to play. So with Facebook, 2 years ago, they kind of made an announcement that said, hey, guess what? We're only going to show your content, your organic content, to about 0 to 6% of your fan base unless you pay for a boosted post or advertising campaign. So Facebook owns Instagram, so it's moving in that direction anyhow. I think other platforms will end up following suit. But really and truly, even before that happened, the clients who use organic and paid media in tandem always have the best results. So I think having that combined strategy or that hybrid approach is always the best way to approach social media and advertising.
That's great. And Ben, I'm going to ask this question towards you. What platform should people be using, and what is a good option for a smaller company versus a bigger company?
Sure. So most of the social media channels do have paid options. We feel like, based on the graph you saw earlier of the different age groups of who's using what platform in what age groups, we feel like Facebook advertising is going to be the #1 way that you reach your audience, especially when you're thinking about metrics like costs per engagement, cost per impression, cost per click. And since Facebook does own Instagram, as you said, Facebook ads are also the way to set up Instagram ads. There are other ways to use social media advertising, such as this guy's expertise, YouTube advertising. Pinterest has ads now as well. And I hear that even Twitter ads are finally becoming slightly useful. So yeah, small companies can still find really good results with even a small budget. You can boost posts so that the posts you're making organically get seen by more people. You can make really targeted approaches to who you're trying to reach, who your audiences are. And I think every business has an opportunity to drive traffic to their website especially.
Would you be able to provide a few examples of that?
Yeah, sure. So we have some really great hotel companies that, they each have their own goals. So if one of the goals is brand awareness, then that's going to be achieved with engagement posts, engagement ads rather. So those are going to go out for $10 a day to really as much as you can imagine per day. The big hitters are spending quite a lot. But even with just $10 or $15 a day, you can make sure that your posts are going to get seen by the people you want. We've also found that a lot of hotels and retail companies are using different methods to drive traffic and to be able to track their purchases. So that's a really handy way for even the smallest of a business to be able to show actual ROI for what they're doing on social.
Brooke or Sean, what kind of content do people need to be able to do to have a successful social media advertising campaign?
You can be successful with any type of content on there. From a quick, even text-based post to full-on videos. But you have to keep in mind that the more engaging your content is, the better the performance is going to be overall. A video campaign with a great storytelling piece, in keeping it short, as Ben already went over, you're going to get really deep engagement, especially on platforms like Facebook, where they're really pushing for video content. But you have to tailor it to the platform as well. So if you're running an ad on Pinterest, you're going to get better performance with image ads. It's going to be too expensive for a lot of the video type content. And then of course YouTube, you're going to need video, and it's going to need to be really good. We've had experience with a lot of clients. They take their TV ads and they just put them onto YouTube, and they run that as their pre-roll, and it inevitably burns hard. It does not do well. You've got to build it for the platform and take advantage of those unique pieces that is for each of them.
For Facebook, what would you recommend?
For Facebook, it's all about testing. Every audience is different. Sometimes a simple image and some text is really all it takes. Sometimes you want to put it together a nice carousel with some beautiful ads. If you're working with an e-commerce client, those carousel ads are awesome.
What's a carousel ad?
So carousel ad is, it's basically what it sounds like. It's just a gallery of images with text for each one. So it's pretty straightforward. But I've also seen a lot of success with video ads on there. But the engagement is really hard to drive. If you have a long video and you're running a Facebook ad, it's really hard to get them to stay engaged with it. And therefore it gets really expensive, because the lower the engagement, the lower that cost is going to be per engagement.
Could you speak to the targeting offerings available for this as well?
Yeah, so the targeting availability pretty much across platforms at this point is really, it's amazing and really sketchy at the same time. They know more about you than you know about yourself. There's the study that shows, Facebook can predict all of your likes based on just 12 pages of data. They can build out your whole profile. So the ability to target on all these platforms is incredible. Facebook, there's a lot of the interest based, so doing lookalike audience based on the pages that you engage with already. On platforms like YouTube, where you're on Google's platform, you have a lot of interesting demographic, as well as targeting based on the content you've engaged with, because they're tracking you across the internet. They're tracking your emails. If you use Gmail, sorry, but they're reading it. And they're using that data to build up what your profile is. So it's a little bit scary, but it also means that we get to put the most relevant message to the most relevant people. You can actually match people up with ads that are good, and give them a message that's actually valuable to them. Show them things that actually they want to see.
And Brooke, in terms of caption length, what would you recommend? In terms of caption length for these, what would you recommend?
Oh gosh, well it depends on the client, I guess. But if we're talking about YouTube, if you notice, most of those ads in the beginning, because you can skip within 5 seconds, right, are very short, like a 5 to 10 second ad. On Facebook, we've seen a lot of success with one of our wine clients with with videos that stay under 30 seconds. And really, we try to get the client to even get down to 15 if at all possible. Because one of the things Facebook does is reward you for video view completion. So the more people that watch your video all the way through, Facebook actually weights that, gives kind of points, I guess, to it with the algorithm, and then shows that video to more people. So if your video is shorter and more people watch it, you'll actually get rewarded by Facebook. So I think you should be careful about the length of your video. And then as you guys were talking about earlier, obviously anytime you can add captions to the video for people who are watching without sound, that's an excellent option as well, to have both sound and or captions available for those people who don't use sound when watching video.
And how would you determine if it was a successful campaign or not?
We use a KPI document with all of our clients because some of our clients have different goals. Well, most of our clients want that net return or direct return on investment with some sort of ROI. But some clients honestly are looking for more of engagement type KPIs, which means that we're looking at things like video completion rates. We're looking at return on conversation, or ROC. That's one of our KPIs with a lot of clients. They're actually using us to help them engage in conversations about the brands online, and we're trying to push those conversations or join conversations that are already happening and guide those conversations in the directions that we need them to go.
And Ben, what measurement tools are out there for people to use?
You know, the native insights on each channel are actually getting better and better. For a while, it seemed pretty necessary to have a third-party app that tracks stats and then reports back to you in a nice glossy fashion. And those are still really helpful for reporting, for giving presentations, you know, for breaking down exactly which key performance indicators you really care about. But Facebook's insights are getting better and better. They really do boil down what's happening to your posts and where your fans are coming from, and attrition versus getting more fans. Twitter's insights are increasingly effective. Yeah, they're much better than they used to be, that's for sure. Instagram, going to insights within the app, is proving to be more and more, they're putting more and more of that data out there so that you know who you're reaching, and that gives you a lot of ability to tweak your strategy based on what you're getting back from what you're putting out.
And if this is my first time launching a social media advertising campaign, what would the steps be for me to launch it?
You go to thinpigmedia.com. If you are launching a campaign for the first time, you want to just think of it like you're a scientist. It's the scientific method. You want to control everything except one thing. So you can run multiple images with the same text and then track which of those images is performing best, and that'll teach you something about your audience. We have retail clients that, you know, they have a lot of photos of just the retail product and then a lot of photos of someone using the product. Well, we don't know which of those is going to perform better unless we test it out. So we run one ad and then another and then another just to see, can we get consistent results that bring back, you know, the answers that we're looking for. You can do the same thing with demographics. You can test the exact same copy and image to men, the exact same copy and image to women, find out, you know, if your insights are correct, that, you know, who you want to be reaching is who you are reaching.
Great insight. Does anybody have any questions?
Do you want to talk a little bit about budget?
Sure.
Social media advertising?
Could you speak to a little bit about the budget then?
Absolutely. So the Facebook intel these days is that $10 to $15 per ad per day is a minimum. So if you're really just looking to try something out and you have absolute bare bones budget, we would suggest planning on 7 to 14 days at $10 to $15 per day. That's per ad, so if you do want to run an A/B test to find out what's working better, you want to run 2 ads at the same time, so that's $20 to $30 per day. The more you're putting into it, really is the more you're getting out of it, not just because Facebook's going to show it to more people, but the more that Facebook can, the more people that Facebook can show it to and gauge their response, the better Facebook's going to be at showing it to the right people. So that's why an ad will work better if you're running a campaign for 10 days versus 3 days, is that it's going to take Facebook a couple of days to learn exactly what's working and what's not, and then they're going to start automatically optimizing, on day 4 through 10. So a larger goal means obviously a larger budget, and if you're looking for ROI, there are ways to be able to track how many purchases you're getting back for your money. So we suggest starting off with something small so that you can test one thing at a time. But if you are seeing positive results, it's worth investing. Bless you. It's worth investing more money to see if you can get that ROI even higher.
Would you say that's the same thing for Instagram as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Instagram is getting more and more used to people shopping, going to a website but staying within the app. So in a very similar sense to Facebook, that if you've done $15 per day is going to be a really good starting point. And then if you're seeing good results, you can start investing a little more.
Can I add something? Please. I think one thing to think about too with budget is think about your audience size that you're targeting. If you think you're going to go to the whole nation, everybody on Facebook, for $10 a day, you're going to be a drop in a bucket. You're not going to have any sort of frequency to your ad. People are going to see it once and it's going to disappear. Now, Facebook specifically, the algorithm has gotten pretty smart, so that can do a lot of the work for you. But you'll be a big step ahead if you're narrowing it down to begin with. So when you go to build your ads on Facebook and build that targeting, it's going to estimate how much people you're going to be reaching. So look at that number and kind of judge based on that. If you're starting out small, you want your targeting what? 2 to 4 million maybe is like a nice spot to start out with.
That's the little. That's when you're setting up an ad. It has the potential audience size at the top right corner, and he's saying that you want that to be. Yeah, I would say 2 million is probably a good maximum, really, if you're trying to use a small budget to reach people.
Yeah, and then once you start seeing where your results are coming from, you can always expand that audience. You can grow that in step with your budget. So I think that's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, sure.
That's what we're here for.
So I want to say too, for like LinkedIn, which we do a lot of B2B ads on LinkedIn, it's very expensive. It's not like Facebook, so we're talking like anywhere from $10 to $30 per click on LinkedIn. But what we see is there's a much higher conversion rate, and they're usually much more qualified buyers. So if you have a little bit of the cash and you're B2B, definitely try out A/B testing on LinkedIn. Or so you can split test between platforms too. So you can look at Facebook, you can put together a similar ad and audience and do the same thing on LinkedIn. And then with Google too, I mean, if we're talking AdWords, your budget really is, it depends, which we all know, we talked about this, is like not the answer you guys want to hear, but there are tools that you can use like SEMrush, where you can actually do competitor research. You can find out what Google AdWords they're running, what they're spending, what ads are successful, and then you can take what they're already doing and what they've spent lots of research money on and make it better. So I definitely think that you should invest in certain tools too, especially if you're spending some good money on any platform, really.
And as part of the targeting aspect of it, would you be able to target your competitors as well, or people who like your competitors?
Yes, we have what we call competitor warfare. It's something that we offer, and we actually go out and attack our competitors with advertising. So all spare love and war and advertising. So.
Great. Does anybody else have any questions?
Oh my God.
Celia?
Hi, hello. I have a question. As you all know, we're very sort of entrenched in moving forward with social media platforms. My big thing is, we are not an inexpensive purchase. We're $500-600 for it. Let's put it, $500-600, $300-400, whatever, half. Do your KPIs shift based on what the purchasing price is? Because one of the hardest things that we're trying to come up with, we know we have to make a full commitment to social, and we're actually not even, our feet are in the water, but we want to really push it out in H2 and into next year. And my owner is going to say to me, great, I'll give you $2, I want to see 6 back. So how do we establish smart, intelligent, thoughtful KPIs for, that's our biggest problem, because we don't know how. We want to be on the social, we want to be, shoppable. I want it all. I feel like I'm a kid in a candy store. you establish your KPIs and then figure from your KPIs back into which of the platforms, you know, it's kind of strategy you come up with. A lot of questions, sorry.
And do you want to take a stab at that?
For this particular example, I would say your best friend is going to be the Facebook Pixel. The Facebook Pixel is a tool that you place on your website, much like you would for Google Analytics, and it not only will trace back which Facebook users are going to your website and performing different actions like checking out certain content, adding to cart, purchasing, registering as an account. Not only are they going to track that, but they are also going to allow you to make lookalike audiences. So that'll help you track people and target people who are very similar to who's visiting your website. And the Pixel has allowed for pretty unprecedented trackable return on ad spend. And catalog ads for retail are really, you can use services like Shopify to upload a catalog to social media so that you can then run ads that have the catalog right there on social. And so one thing that it made me think of is attribution. For a higher end product, you're not necessarily, and this is the same for hotels, you're not necessarily going to expect that someone's going to see an ad, click, and right there and then make the purchase. It's something that needs a little more consideration. Maybe you got to check with somebody. Maybe you got to ask for a little more allowance. And then after 7 days, 3 weeks, you're going to go back to the website.
It's planting seeds.
It's planting seeds, and also the Facebook Pixel is going to still track the attributed purchases. So even if you're not seeing, clicks immediately turning into purchases, if those people are coming back within a couple of weeks, you're going to see that they made a purchase. And so for the higher end products and experiences, we feel like the Pixel is going to allow you to see whether or not that ad is not only successful the day of, but was it successful at planting the seed and then they came back.
So is there a Pixel that is Insta related?
So the Facebook Pixel works for both Facebook and Instagram. Yeah. What did I miss?
Everything.
I missed everything?
I have a follow-up question to that, Ben.
Sure.
Do you know, from a technical standpoint, if you go to your sites with all of these different pixels from all of these different areas, does that slow down your site speed at all?
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and you really want to pick your platforms wisely.
Well, no, I was curious because if you have, you have all of these different pixels installed in all of these different areas.
So we do a lot of SEO and website optimization as well, and that's one of the biggest issues we run into every time. And what ends up happening too is people try different platforms over time and they forget that they have these things installed. And sometimes they're the slowest things on the page. They're the things slowing down the page the most. And they're constantly optimizing that. They're constantly fixing it. The Facebook Pixel, that one, it's about weighing the cost and the benefit. With the Facebook Pixel, you've got a great platform with huge reach and really good tracking analytics, so it's worth it. But when you start loading on your share buttons too, those are a huge culprit. People put those links, the plugins and stuff on your blog posts that have little buttons say share it on Pinterest, share it on this, share it on that. Those slow down your pages so much, and that impacts conversions, that impacts your search rankings. You really want to cut down on that.
Is there a number, like an ideal number, no more than 5, no more than 3?
It's as few as you can. That's really what it comes down to, is try to do as few as you can. Sometimes it just has to happen. If you've got really big campaigns on multiple platforms, it's just going to have to happen. Try to not have it installed on every page. You don't have to install it across your whole website, depending on how your website is set up. Maybe if you just have an e-commerce section, that's where you've got the tracking and you're not going to do it on your blog. Just get creative with it. And the other thing with the, your budget and what platforms are you going to go to, pick one and get it dialed in. Don't dilute your spend, because that's the quickest way to just basically watch your money bleed away. You've gotta reach a certain threshold of your impression frequency and how saturated your audience is to really see what those results are going to be like for you. And if you're spread too thin, it's not going to end well for you.
Well, I think we have one more question available. Does anybody have that?
I have one, but.
Celia, do you have another question?
Sorry, Laura.
No, go ahead. We have time for another one.
Are you hearing great success with the shoppable enhancement? I mean, are you hearing clients saying this is really working? It's an area that we are very seriously looking into next year, 2019, to launch it as a opportunity for our customers. So are you hearing good things? I mean, I see them all the time on Instagram, and I have not yet done it, but are you hearing good things? Are you hearing yes? I'm not seeing happy faces.
For me, I feel like it's new enough that I'm not seeing a ton of, it's the news of whether it's working or not is not rising to the surface, but it's something that they are still rolling out. There's still a lot of businesses that don't have that access. They can't set up shoppable images yet. So I think it's maybe too early to tell. Any other insight on that?
Just adding to that as well, the shoppable feature on Instagram really, as Ben mentioned, was only available to certain businesses, and it just launched so that a lot more businesses could use it starting in March. So it's something fairly new and something still developing. But as the year goes on, I think a lot of brands, we're going to start to see that a lot more come up on our Instagram feed as well as on Facebook as well.
And shoppable images right now can only be done organically. You can't put money into promoting shoppable images yet. I know. So they're rolling out, it's coming, it's on the way. That's the Instagram motto, it's coming soon. So right now you can do it organically and see, I mean, that's actually a good way to test it since you literally can't put money into it. It's a decent way of trying it out to see whether it works, and then hopefully soon
So
it
all the
will
ones
be.
I'm seeing are really sort of tests.
They're just organic, yeah. They're just coming through your feed because you're interested in that.
And by that he means that for advertising, you can't push out the shoppable features just yet, but then later on, hopefully that'll be a part of it.
Yeah.
Great.
So, of course, I get to ask another question because we're running ahead of schedule, which is good. So, in addition to everybody in this room, we have a lot of people who are logging in. I'm getting texts from certain people on YouTube. And there's two sides to all of it, right? There are clients who are really sophisticated and are already doing some of this. And then we have some clients that are just now entering the US market. So there's two different objectives here, right? There's the advertising where you want to sell, but then there are clients who are just getting into this market and they need the followers and the fans, right? They're just launching their platforms. And it seems to me there's two different strategies. So since we have a few minutes, can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, the first strategy, if I have a client who's just launching here, and they really need to build that digital database before they can sell to it, what's the strategy for doing that?
It's a great question for Sean.
It's not just on YouTube. All over.
Yeah. So one of the new features on Facebook, and it's available in different ways on other platforms too, is using engagement. Using advertising, and your KPI or your goal is engagement. So that can mean getting more interaction on your content as well as getting page followers or followers on the platform that you're using. And the pixel kind of comes into play here. So I know we've mentioned the pixel, but I think that's probably like step number 2. I would say goals, figure out what you want, if it's sales or engagement or whatever that is, number 1. Step 2, pixel. Because what you can do is when anybody comes through and engages on your content, you can actually run ads to the people who've engaged with your content to kind of keep in touch with them. And I would recommend putting together some sort of nurture sequence that would get them to interact with the brand and get you that ROC or return on conversation, have them interact with you, and then hopefully become a loyal follower of the brand. So that would be my recommendation there. And then earlier, when you were talking about small budgets and goals, I would say also, which we've talked about a ton, is split testing. Because we have a client who, they're in the financial sector, they offer rewards, they work with a bunch of credit cards and Home Depot and PF Chang's and brands like this to give rewards. So we did a split test between Facebook, thinking Facebook was gonna knock it out of the park, and Twitter. And we actually saw Twitter beat Facebook like crazy. We saw a 12% lift in sales within 3 weeks of starting these ads. So if you have a small budget and you're not sure where you want to be and you are in a lot of different places, my suggestion is to split test in the beginning, give it a couple of weeks, and check out the different platforms with similar ads, because you may be surprised. Don't count Twitter out just yet.
And I would add to that that a lot of times the assumption, social media is still so new, and one of the assumptions that was made early on is that the amount of fans and followers that you have is more important than any other metric, and that's just not the case. It is a, what's going on over here? Yay! It is a quality over quantity game. So setting up engagement ads, I think, is going to be a much better way of even strictly just building an audience, because how often do you see an ad come through your feed that is just trying to get you to click like on the page itself? It's much more common that you'll see an ad that's trying to get you to comment, trying to get you to share it or go to the website. So I would say engagement ads are a really good way to build the audience of people who are going to care about that. The other cool thing about the Pixel is that you can run engagement ads that are still tracked through the Pixel, and then you can create a custom audience of people who have engaged with your post, and then you can create a lookalike audience of people who are similar to the people who have engaged with your posts. So it's a way of you starting with engagement ads, kind of blossoming the audience, cross-pollinating, and then using that to build a new audience of people who are very similar to those users.
What's a minimum budget that somebody would need to start with that?
Honestly, still $10 to $15 per ad per day. So a basic campaign, just a couple of $100, and that will, at the very least, it will increase word of mouth. It'll get your brand seen, and if you're A/B testing, it'll teach you something.
Any other questions?
Can I add something to that real quick? I know this is a panel on advertising, but if you're just starting out, I think it's worth mentioning that this advertising for your growth of your page it needs to be in conjunction with really heavy organic efforts. The advertising is not like your easy solution to it. You can't just throw money at it. Why are people even going to be on your page if you're not doing anything on it, anything interesting? And also, don't forget about dark social. Our old world social techniques where we interact, person to person. I know we don't do that much anymore, but it's really valuable when you're just starting out. And email, which is a hugely overlooked, that is a social channel. You have the ability to have a conversation with people via email, and you can use that email list that you've built up for your business to drive people to your new social channels and get them to follow you in that way. So I just wanted to make sure to note that as well.
I just want to
Follow up with Brooke, because twice I've heard you mention Twitter. And when you go to all the industry conferences and everything, right, people are talking about, oh, Instagram. I don't even know about Facebook, but I'm glad to hear that everybody thinks Instagram is it. And those of us in the business for a while who have thousands of followers on Twitter, our clients have thousands of followers on Twitter, you don't want to just forget about that. And so I've heard you say, don't count Twitter out yet. So can you just talk for a minute about, A, why everybody thinks Twitter's going out, and B, why we shouldn't count it out yet?
I think you always have to look at the source. So if you recall, a few months ago, gosh, it could have been a year ago at this point, there was an article that came out that was like, Facebook is dead, there's a mass exodus of all of these millennials leaving Facebook and it's going away. Do you know who pinned that article? The original writer of that article was one of the co-owners of Snapchat. So you really have to look at where your research is coming from, and sometimes because posts or articles are syndicated from one site to another, you're not really sure who wrote the post. It shows up on Inc., but it originated from Snapchat. So I think the whole Twitter is dead thing is probably coming from Facebook or someone of the like, So, but I just, it's not saying that Twitter will work for everyone, because listen, 9 times out of 10 we haven't gotten the results on Twitter. Facebook wins out, honestly, 9 times out of 10 for us. But that's why we're so into split testing in the very beginning. Even if you take a tiny portion of your budget and you split test by platform, so if you have those followers on Twitter, don't count Twitter out. Do a little split test. Run a similar ad on Facebook and a similar ad on Twitter and just see what happens. Because like I said, for us, we were like, oh, Facebook's gonna knock this out of the park. They're totally gonna win. You're not even gonna wanna use Twitter. And then lo and behold, we got, I think, like a 1% lift on Facebook and a 12%. I mean, the client is so happy they gave us an extra $5,000 a month to put towards Twitter ads. So, you know, when you're seeing that kind of sales lift, you're fine throwing the money at it. So I just think it's a, never count something out and don't believe everything that you read. Do your due diligence, do your homework, and try to figure out where the source of the article or the information or the rumor came from, too.
All right, well, thank you so much for everybody and the panelists for joining us. We're going to take a 15-minute break for bathroom break or any water break, and we'll return shortly.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty underlooked channel that has a lot of power.
So this was working okay, but now we're going to do a tripod with a patch, yeah. And the audio feed, right? Yeah, the patch. Yeah. This is the one. Yeah, let me.
No, that's fine.
No, that's what we'll need.
Yeah.
Quarter mini? Yeah, we're good.
What happened? This is a big hole to a little gap.
No, that's right, but it's, you said you have the adapter from TRS to TRRS, right?
No, from TRRS to TRS. We need TRRS.
Okay.
We need this.
The 3-band.
No, we need this. The 3-band is TRRS, which is for smart.
Did I get the right one?
Yeah, that's right. I know when you went over there, it was probably like doesn't look different.
Oh, yeah. Not even. It's overwhelming for somebody like me to just go from what kind of thing.
Yeah.
Both of these?
Yeah.
So we have a few.
No, just that one.
So we have a few moments. So when you're ready, just let me know when you want to do a quick test to see the audio levels.
Sweet. Sounds good. You're all over it. I think it's fine, yeah. Oh, do you have one? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to. Can you thread that in just a second? Hold on.
Sure. All right. How's everybody doing so far? I know we had a lot of intel, and there's a lot of questions that are being circulated around. But our next presentation is from Andrew Caravella from Sprout Social, who will be talking about analytics, how to determine ROI, and further information. So without further ado, Andrew, please welcome on stage.
Thank you. Hi, I'm going to try to figure out where to stand here. Maybe I'll do it this way. Thanks for having me, first of all. My name is Andrew. Sprout Social. I've been there about 5.5 years. Everyone familiar with Sprout Social? Should I do a little intro on the company? Social media management platform. Cool. My role there over the last 5.5 years has really been around marketing and strategy, so working and building the team that supports the organization and our brand, working a lot with customers and agencies and a variety of verticals, and sort of helping them figure out some strategic elements to their programs beyond just our software. So I'm happy to be here today and talk a bit about luxury in the social space, to talk a bit about social analytics and ROI, to talk about several things that I think are interesting to me from the perspective of the culture and the behavior of social and how that lends itself to hospitality. And I'm also happy to take your questions. So throughout, I'm a big believer in interactive participation. So if you have questions or sort of want me to go down a certain path, feel free to shoot your hand up. There is going to be a mic kind of roaming around just so everyone can hear. So feel free to interject throughout. We'll definitely have time for questions at the end as well. But we're ready to go? Cool, awesome. If you can actually go back. He's my clicker, so stay there. Does anybody know what property this is? Where? Montage Laguna Beach, exactly. So, very good, very good. So, a few years ago, I went, and sort of the inspiration, I think, or sort of the nexus for this talk for me as I was putting this stuff together was, I was thinking about, I love to travel. I'm on planes almost weekly. I love to vacation. I like, good service and a lot of the things that I know a lot of you guys are focused on as well. And as I was thinking about some stories and some anecdotes, I thought back to a couple of years ago. I was at the Montage Laguna Beach with some friends for the weekend, and we had just arrived. And we were sitting on this is sort of like the restaurant and balcony area. We were sitting there having, a couple glasses of wine and champagne and just kind of ready to relax for the weekend. And my friends and I were talking about our favorite drinks. And we were talking about, we had ordered, I think, a bottle of champagne or this and that, and we were sort of just chit-chatting, seemingly amongst ourselves. And I think I had mentioned at some point, like, oh, whenever I'm at the beach or at a pool, I love a good, like, strawberry daiquiri, because it just sort of, like, especially in the morning, it kind of, like, picks you right up. I mean, it's true. So we were just sort of chit-chatting, and no less than 15 minutes later, we were still drinking our champagne, and we were still sort of having our cocktails and relaxing. And a waiter comes out and brings me a strawberry daiquiri. And he was like, I heard you like these. We thought you maybe want to enjoy one of ours. I didn't even realize that there was, staff or sort of people within the context of our conversation, let alone that they would go so far and actually just bring me one because they know I like them. And I thought that, as I was thinking about this, like, that's luxury, right? That's luxury to me, and why? And I should also say one of my friends who I was with is the head of consulting at Forbes Travel Guides. So you're probably familiar with that company as well, given your business. And he and I talk a lot about sort of, in my space, what social means and how social activities translate from in-person experiences. We also talk about sort of what it means to really sort of surprise and delight people. And as we think about luxury, and what I want you guys to think about as we talk about all this today, there's three sort of overriding factors to me that I think are important and I think really translate well to social as you think about it as well. The first is that luxury is positive, right? It's about advancing and sort of having a good energy, vibes, making someone feel good about where they are, what they're doing, where they're staying, all that stuff. It's a positive experience. The second one is that it's anticipatory, right? Great luxury experiences actually, in this case of my, strawberry daiquiri, sort of anticipated that I liked it and I would enjoy it if they brought it to me, and they did it, and they went ahead and sort of took that action. And the third thing is that it's additive, right? It's about giving you more and more and making you feel even more, worthy of being in the experience that they're willing to provide. And so I'll sort of reference that, and if you want to go to the next slide, as far as today's conversations, I want to talk, and I'll share some data around some of the behavioral considerations that I think we're seeing in the social space that affect the programming that you guys are putting together and what's important to you and your clients. We'll talk about sort of what a positive, luxurious experience is on social, which can be very similar or dissimilar to what it may be in real life. We'll also talk a bit about sort of the anticipatory and authentic social engagement and how to do that as you build programs for your customers. And then we'll also talk, and a little bit throughout, but really about adding value and using metrics to really sort of think, or using data to think beyond vanity metrics and sort of the basic level understanding of social data, but really sort of thinking a bit more broadly and a bit more specifically as not only you, but as your customers and the people that you work with are becoming more sophisticated. Sound good? Cool. So Sprout Social does something every year called the Sprout Social Index, and it's a pretty extensive data report that looks at and considers both brand behaviors and interests, as well as consumer behaviors and interest around social and what that interaction points look like. We just launched our 2018 index last year, so I've got some fresh data for you. And I wanted to share a few data points. The first one is challenges for social marketers. So as you think about this, what are some of the things, and we asked a lot of marketers, what are some of the things that are most challenging to you as a social marketer? And interestingly, a lot of them are dependent on data and what data you have at your fingertips and how you're able to actually think through that data and make it something actionable. So measuring ROI is the first one. Understanding cross-channel success. So beyond social, how does that impact everything else? Developing a strategy to support business goals, determining what content to post, which we'll talk a bit about, and securing budget and resources, right? There's data that can contribute to all of those decisions. Next slide. A couple other interesting things, and I wanted to point this out because it was part of our intro conversation as I was building this talk, is the idea around ad budgets, right? And with social, the need and sort of the conversation that for many networks and for a lot of people, ad dollars and needing ad dollars to support your social programming is becoming more of a necessity. In some ways, I think that's true, but what I want to focus on today is knowing that, given different networks and propensity to need ad dollars to kind of become more visible and more engaging, but also with the fact that not all the marketers, certainly many of you in this room, probably have the budget and the dollars that you would need. I wanted to focus a bit more on what you can do organically and some of the strategies and tactics we have at our fingertips that are not necessarily in line with just, everyone's got as much money as possible. That's not the case. Next slide. The other interesting thing, and by the way, this is all available at sproutsocial.com/index, and I know that we'll be sharing this presentation as well afterwards, so don't worry about writing anything down. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, switching a bit more around sort of overall challenges, was very, very specifically to social, thinking about some of the most used features and strategies within social networks. So thinking about social analytics and understanding what that means. Paid and organic social and how that sort of interplays between each other. Instagram stories getting a bit more specific, live video, UGC, listening, all these things that are at their fingertips and how the propensity that they have to use them. What's also interesting is that varies by network, and I'm sure you guys see this as well. So what you need to be successful or to make an impact on one network may be very different for another. And so that's something I want to make sure that we're thinking about and considering as we talk about your strategies and your programs. And lastly, sort of from a data perspective, akin to the whole Sprout Index and sort of broad-based macro data, what I think is really important to remember is that everyone, and I see this a lot across industries, jumps into, we have so much data, let's get into it. But before you go into what data you have, you really need to think about why you want to look at the data. What is the goal of it? What are you intending to get out of it? Whether or not you get that out of it is another thing, but what are you thinking about? And so when we asked people, it was everything from, analyzing campaign performance, thinking about who their audiences are and what their communities look like, developing content, like I said before, reporting to our boss, right? Like that is a use case for data and ROI and being able to understand what it is and what you can actually accomplish. Also thinking about optimizing campaign performance. If we think about this, social is minute by minute, day by day, month by month, quarter by quarter. You're constantly tweaking and changing and doing things that are required to make sure that you're being as best as you can be. And obviously measuring ROI is another thing. What's interesting, and this is data also from the index specific to the travel and hospitality industry. So we've got behaviors that marketers are thinking about and all the things that I think are important from a macro level, but from a very specific level, something that I think is interesting from an individual and a consumer behavior is that 33% of people are likely to include brands in their life milestone posts, many of which include travel and hospitality or trips or things like that, right? So the idea that if they're at a property or they're flying an airline or they're doing whatever they're doing, that they might include that brand and your handle in their experience and in their life milestone is very real. Ironically, on the flip side, with social, travel and hospitality of the 15 industries that we looked at is the 4th most complained about industry. I think it was finance or like, okay, I should know this. You like utilities? I want to say like telecom, like that sort of thing, right? It's interesting sort of how that all plays out. And the other interesting thing specific to your industry is that the average response time on social is 11.3 hours. So if you think about it, I mean, people could be in and out of your property or, you know, on and off your plane within that time, and you haven't even responded to them, and obviously their issue is over. And this is specific, obviously, to actually responding to and engaging people on social. Predominantly, we think about this in the context of social customer care and what that means and what that looks like, which is a bit different than sort of social marketing, but it's all relative, I think, and important as you think about people's expectations, right, which is really what this is all about. So this is me, and I wanted to get into a couple of sort of, again, larger issues as I think about why people do what they do. And this is my Instagram feed, and I think about it not to show you that I have a fabulous life, because it's like you're not getting like Saturday night watching the Golden Girls on my couch up here either, right? Like it's very like, ooh, I'm in Paris, great, right? So, but that led me, as I thought about it as well, to this idea that we very much live in a culture of curation, right? And what people decide to put onto their social networks is a curated, thoughtful, sometimes, you know, multiple selfies to get the right angle approach. And I think as brands and as businesses, and certainly in the luxury and in the hospitality industries, I think we have to recognize that. And then if you move to the next one, think about sort of this quest to make luxury experiences very attainable and authentic, and what that looks like for us as brands, right? So just as people are kind of taking those same steps to crop and wash and make sure everyone gets like the perfect view, there's an example and there's a rationale for brands doing the same thing. But there's also a rationale for not overdoing it and making it seem inauthentic and not exciting and not really something that people can relate to. So just as a trend, this is something, again, I talk about a lot and I think is really fascinating because I think it changes cultural behavior. And it's since the advent of social, I think this whole idea of curating your life is really fascinating. And I think the bulk of us are guilty of it, and it's not a bad thing, but it's just a new normal. The second example I wanted to talk about when it comes to personality and sort of attaining some interesting thing, and I just was talking to Laura about this before. So has anybody been to the Old Clare Hotel in Sydney, Australia? Okay, so I was just there a few weeks ago. Sprouts put some people on the ground in Australia as we grow. We spent a week doing some local market events and kind of drumming up some business there. And I have to say, it was one of the best arrival experiences that I've ever had. That was an in-person arrival experience. It had nothing to do with social media, insofar as I experienced it for the first time when I walked into my room. But what's interesting about how they got it and the subsequent sharing of it is very social related. So I'm a huge tennis fan. If you follow my Twitter or sort of understand anything about me, you know that I'm a huge tennis fan, particularly Roger Federer. When I walked into my room, I had a framed photo of Roger, which is like fun to look at for a week, right, while you're there. I had like a whole little care package, a super nice note, and kind of just this general welcome of like, we've done some reconnaissance on you and we know who you are and what you like, and if you're going to be here for 9 days, we want to make it a little bit more exciting and special. That's fantastic. I obviously then did exactly what you see here. I snapped a photo of it, put it on Twitter, put it on Instagram, put it on everywhere, and it was kind of this full circle moment. But if you think about, again, sort of luxury experiences and making people feel special and individual, this is a great example that I just experienced, but I think it matters because I think it can differentiate you as a business and as a brand, as a company. It can certainly work towards, you know, repeat business and referrals and all the sort of things that we can get into on the data side, and how you track all of that. But I think forgetting the human components is done all too often by a lot of brands and a lot of verticals. And I think one of the things that I'm always very impressed with and I think is really fantastic about, you know, sort of the travel and hospitality industry on the whole is that people spend a lot of money, they take personal time, it's a big investment sometimes for people, and so if we can, as an industry, make sure that we're not only just, you know, accepting them and welcoming them when they walk into our hotel or into our property, but also thinking about what the overall lifestyle experience is with us across channels, across platforms, and all that other stuff, that is a huge differentiating factor, I think, in terms of creating loyalty and getting people excited and obviously turning into repeat business and things like that. And so if you think about the engagement habits, right, ordinarily several years ago, I would not have a way, I would have told my friends about that. I would have maybe given them, you know, maybe taken a photo or whatnot and shared it once I got it developed, right? But I mean, this is the ability to sort of act and promote in real time is so important. And so as you think about those shifts in habits, the idea of participation and really sort of engagement and interactivity is huge, not just among each other, but among the brands and the consumers that you're working with. Does that make sense? Does that ring true to you guys in terms of sort of what you're focused on, what you're thinking about, what your clients are asking for? Cool. So as we think about how to create those experiences and sort of what kind of content, and this all leads into obviously how do we measure it, but if we think about this, I wanted to share a few suggestions and thoughts that I've got, that I've worked with some other people in your industry on, but also I think it sort of resonates across industries, is really what are the opportunities you have to do when it comes to social. And I think one of the first is to highlight the value that you provide, right? If people are coming for a luxury experience, there's things that they expect and there's things they want to see. So what can you do to educate those prospective guests, or repeat guests, quite frankly, about your property, about your services, about your brand, about the expectations, all the things that you can do from a content standpoint and from a communication standpoint via social while they're doing, the lead up, or while they're there, or quite frankly, after they leave. Thinking about streamlining research, right? So for those of people who are maybe making their first foray or trying to do something different or going to a new city, what are the research elements that people are looking for very tactically when it comes to travel? Price, location, all the sorts of things that are important. Making sure that you can provide that relevant information via social is huge, because you can also measure it on the back end. Also thinking about surprising and delighting throughout the process. We obviously use the example that I had from Australia, but sort of utilizing social listening and social data, and whether that's looking individually at a person's profile to find out something very specific to what they might like, or also thinking about more broadly about your community and the kinds of people that typically, stay at your properties or buy from you or things like that. But thinking about that experience before, during, and after is huge, because I don't think that it's often done enough. And it really can make the difference between thinking, oh, that was a great time while I was there, to recalling fondly, that was amazing, and they followed up and they kind of kept this relationship going, right? If you think about the relationship business that you are in, using the right channels and making sure that you can measure that effectiveness is super important. A few other things to think about. Utilizing UGC, this is something that we talk a lot about. I'm sure you guys think about and figure out ways. I know you talked about influencers and a lot of other things. What is you obviously have, and in a lot of ways, want to present a certain image about your brands and your companies that are, on brand, right? That are approved, that are the kinds of visuals and videos and things that you think are important and reflective of exactly who you want to be. The reality is the way people see you and the things that they do while they're on property, while they're doing things with your brand, and the fact that they're creating that user-generated content is a whole host of real and authentic and very cool content that you should be tapping into. So utilizing and understanding that if and when you do use those things, what are some of the things that you can do, whether that's content created from guests, from staff, from people within the context of your community, right? Influencers. There's a lot of things that you can take away and incorporate into a strategy that isn't just owned and created by you. This is one I love, and I think it's really applicable in this space as well, but enlisting star power. And I think too often people think about influencers and star power as being like Beyonce, right? Like, that's not gonna, maybe it will happen if that's wonderful for you, but like, I think that you have to look a bit more into this idea of micro-influencers and thinking about the people that are important to you, or the people that they might interact with. So everything from chefs, concierges, influencers, other sort of things, people that, and stars that maybe are more important to the experience that they might have while they're with you or while they're engaging with you online, than someone who maybe has no relevancy or cause to be associated with your brand. And the likelihood of that being more cost-effective and more of a connection point is very real. And lastly, thinking about the mixing and the testing of mediums. So this is super important as well, and I think it's something that when we talk a little bit more about analytics, we'll get into, but this idea of knowing what you have at your disposal, what works, what doesn't work, where it works, when it works, and all the sorts of things that you can sort of test and try out is super important, because it keeps things interesting, because obviously, as everyone knows, social is sort of this fleeting, very fast-moving environment. And so how can you make sure that you're constantly iterating and sort of taking a step in the right direction and not getting sort of stuck and stalled in what you think you know or you think is going to resonate? Questions on any of that? Content standpoint? Cool. Does anybody know this hotel? In the middle, the bottle cap? It is. It's the Park Hyatt Shanghai. So also with my friend, I will tell you, having a friend who works in travel is a great thing. We were in Asia for a few weeks, and we were sort of doing this fun trip a couple of years ago, and he was like, listen, I hate to do this, but work has asked me since I'm over here to go and inspect the Park Hyatt. So that means we have to like go to all the restaurants, go to the spas, do all that stuff. And I was like, Okay, if we must, right? And so we go, and I obviously am like a novice, and I just like to be fun places, but he's a professional, right? And so as you think about his perception and his perspective on all the things that make a hotel great, it's a fascinating process, and I'm sure many of you are involved in this and think about this. But we got there the first day, and we had eaten at one of the restaurants. We got into our room, and like literally within minutes, he had like whipped his computer open and was just like typing. And all I hear this like, it's like +1, +1, -1, +1. I'm like, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, I'm filling out like all of our forms around, how we rate and what are the things that we think are important. And it's obviously all numeric and very metric based in terms of what decides, the quality and the luxuriousness, I guess, of a hotel and whatnot that feeds into their whole system, which I'm not an expert on, by the way, in any way, shape, or form. But it got me thinking again about this idea of like the additive property, right? How do you add things, and what are the things that are important, and what are the metrics that in their case that they think as a business is important to what makes a nice property? And I think there's application to that as we think about social. What are the things that are important to you, and what are the things that you should be thinking about? So as we switch to metrics, ordinarily I would probably end with this next slide, but I wanted to kick off with it because I think it's important, and I was talking to Laura about this as well as we were getting going. I think when it comes to data and ROI, and certainly social data and metrics, there's a lot of confusion, and a lot of people tend to think that they can just sort of either skate by and like, ooh, we got a lot more likes and a lot more followers, we're good, which is not a sophisticated strategy, if you ask me. But then on the flip side, they know they need to go deeper, but they don't really know where to go or what to do or how to start. And so I wanted to do is share some of the questions that I think you should be asking yourselves for whether it's an entire social program or a very specific campaign that's going to run for a couple days or a week, whatever the case may be. And I'll run through each of these, and I would love to hear if these are things you are already asking for yourselves, if there's others that you would definitely ask yourselves, and go from there. The first one, and I think because we can't live in a silo, how does social media management fit within our overall digital marketing strategy? You have to understand and figure that out, because if you don't, you're just going to go run with social and tweet and post away, and it's going to have no correlation to what you're doing in totality. And I think that's a disservice to you and the work that you'll be doing. So really thinking about how it fits in. The second question is, what actual measurements and KPIs do we want to consider when we're assessing our productivity? And I just deliberately say productivity because I think it's about, again, not just doing, but having a result or being productive as a result. So if we're going to be creating a campaign around a summer promotion or whatever the case may be, and it's going to run for a month, what are the actual measurements and KPIs that are important to that campaign? If we're thinking about our overall, the health of our social programs, and we want to focus, and we know engagement is super important to us, or customer care is very important to us. What are the metrics and KPIs that are specific to those strategies, and delineate those and define them, and certainly set benchmarks for what your baselines are, where you're at, and then you've got something to actually work against. The third one is, how often do we shift our strategy based on performance numbers and data? And this is a big one, because I think, like I just said, we sort of go through the process of setting numbers, putting in baselines, setting goals for the year, and then we never go back and actually look at them. Were our goals right? Were they off? Did we not have the bandwidth to even get anywhere near the goals that we put forth in the beginning of the year because of shifting priorities? So on and so forth. So making sure that you set a cadence or sort of a regular check-in with you and your teams and the people that matter around, how often you're going to actually look at the data, but also how often you might actually shift a strategy based on those results. Because setting that, because what I want people to avoid, and I see this time and time again, up and down the spectrum of sophistication, is that social can be a very, very reactive place. Like something happens, like, I was about to swear, so I'm not going to swear, but like that happens, like what do you do, right? How do you fix it? How do you course correct? And so thinking about and having some of these things delineated at the onset makes those moments of not sheer crisis, but sort of moment of anxiety much easier to deal with because you've thought through them in the first place. The fourth question, what data will help us make smarter decisions and achieve top-down buy-in? And that is different than the third question, because you may shift around, you may make some changes, but what's actually going to make you better and smarter in the long run? than just sort of, again, continuing to tweak and refine and playing around and seeing. And both of those are important, but really differentiating the two is important. And I bring top-down buy-in into the fold, and I'm not sure if this is, specific to your cases, if it's hugely important or minorly important, but, having the people who you need to report back on, whether it's a client, whether it's an executive, understand what you're trying to do and what it means to their perspective and what they're thinking about is very important. So knowing, again, what data you have at your fingertips and what are the things that they care about is very important as well. And the last one, because again, social can be a very volatile environment, how do we handle peaks and valleys in performance? And does the variance actually matter to us, right? So you're going to see spikes across networks, across months, quarters, days, hours. All the data points can change and shift pretty dramatically. But what do we do? Because again, it can be a very reactive state. And what I like to do and how I view and certainly how I've run our teams at Sprout as well is, there will be variance according to things that we can control and things that we cannot control. I mean, airlines, this is a perfect example, right? There's things they can control, like their plane doesn't work, and there's things they can't control, like there's a hurricane, right? There's very different kinds of crises and reactions and components and conversations that are happening on social. So knowing what you actually have in your control, I think, again, gives you that sense of calm and at least assurance that you are, in the long run, tracking and thinking about some of the right metrics. Does that all resonate? Are there things that you think that maybe I've missed or things that you would maybe prioritize differently in here? Are there questions that you guys are maybe sort of struggling to answer for yourselves? Yep. Hi. A mic is coming your way.
This is for the live stream.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm with this hotel, the Dominic. Hi. And I think, I know a lot of people, probably most in this room, are travel industry. Something that I think we've always struggled with, or at least I have, with the metrics part of the travel industry is how do you measure what we're doing? We touched upon this a little bit earlier. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've bought a pair of jeans from an ad I've seen, or seen a really cool post and bought a bathing suit or done something like that. People don't make travel decisions like that. They have to, like you said, a lot of times it's a bigger purchase. A lot of times it requires a plane ticket or discussing with family members or taking off of work. And I think the industry is very behind on social in what is good, but I think part of it is because how do you justify all of the money you're putting in? And these metrics, I agree 100%, we need to figure out what your KPIs make sense for that property. Mm-hmm. But have you seen specifically with your travel clients, people don't, and even if you go back 7 days later, I mean, you're really looking at travel decision. It's much more different than buying a retail product.
Absolutely. You're very right. And sort of the time to sale, if you will, right, in that sort of language is much more elongated sometimes, unless you're like me that hasn't bought a flight for this weekend yet, but that's a whole nother story. And also, to your point, like understanding the emotional commitment that they're trying to make to it is also very important, and that is much more difficult to measure. But I think part of the answer is, at least in your question, right? Thinking about the kinds of things that they may be thinking through, and knowing that within social, part of your job is to engage with them in an acknowledgement of those sorts of considerations. So whether that is providing resources around, now I gotta think of an example here, providing resources around, this is not a great example, but like best times to fly or like best times to purchase airline tickets based on, typical prices. Again, may not be appropriate for you, but thinking about what do you have and what knowledge do you have as an industry professional and as a property or a hotel or whatever that will help make that decision more informed, easier, and solidify it, right? And so how you can measure those things then goes back into the idea of understanding the content that you're putting out there, the engagement. So at a very high level, it's not only, like I was saying, vanity metrics. There's obviously likes, followers, all the sorts of very true, tried and true things. But then there's sort of a second layer of metrics around engagements and shares and comments and DMs and some of the very specific data for an individual network that shows that people are actually taking an action on something, or a lot of times people think questions are a bad thing. It's like, oh, it's more work, it's social customer care. I think questions are a great thing. If you can answer them and sort of help turn the experience, if it's a negative one or even if it's an uncertain one, into something positive, that I think has a lot more value, and there's ways to kind of measure on social specifically sort of everything from the number of conversations you have in order to solve a conversation and trying to maybe diminish that and make it a quick resolution, to a bit more complicated in sort of metrics and data is actually tying that back into, okay, we talked to these people on social, they then went ahead and booked, and so there's a lot of uncertainty and still work to be done, I would say, in the industry around actually tying an attribution modeling and sort of analytics around what happens on social and tying it directly to an actual dollar amount. Right? That is a bit more difficult, and I don't know that there are a ton of companies or vendors, us included, that have maybe solved for that as well as I think it needs to be. I'm also realizing this is a really long-winded answer to your question, but I think the attribution part of it is certainly, it's not one to be taken lightly, but I think it's also not one to be overzealous or sort of too exploratory on. Like, don't make it up. Like, if you don't know, so we can't track this, but we can track that. Like, we don't know, we can't get all the way to here, but we can get to X, Y, Z, and sort of understanding your limits is, I think, an important part of managing expectations. But I'd be happy to talk a bit more about that specifically.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Sharon. I'm also with the Dominic. I've spent most of my career in hospitality with both classic luxury hotels and now this hotel, the Dominic, more of a modern luxury. So this question relates to influencers or micro-influencers. Could you illustrate an example in hotels of where you've seen that be successful? Because I can only say that in my quest to look for appropriate influencers for appropriate brands, and again, understanding that there are different KPIs, I haven't seen anyone move the needle in terms of buying hotel rooms. I mean, we see it more so with maybe someone going to a restaurant or coming for happy hour. But for those higher price point purchases, $500, $1,000, have you seen success in the hotel space?
That's in terms of using influencers to actually impact decision making and buying. It's a tough one. I don't know that I have any specific, sort of case studies or data points. I can definitely follow up with our teams and see if we do have any examples of that specifically. I think the interesting thing to think about that again is, oh, I hear we have examples. You're going to do my work for me. This is amazing.
We work with influencers quite a bit because we do PR for several hotels, as you know. And we have, there's a 5-star resort in St. Lucia that we worked with. I think it was in the fall. We worked with an influencer named JC Dupree. She has the site Damsel in Dior. And to this day, we've been working with them for about 1.5 years. And to this day, she's the #1 traffic driver to their website. And I think she resulted in about 11 bookings, and everybody that was speaking with reservations would say, oh, we saw this beautiful video on her channel, the way she was speaking about the resort, we saw the different activities she could do, and because the price point of her audience aligned with that of the resort, it was just a really great brand alignment. And I think that that's the most key element, is looking at the kind of followers that she has and what their price point is. And if she's posting pictures with a bag that might be a handbag that your guests might carry, or if the comments in her comment section are like, wow, I love that bag, or wow, where are you? It shows that they're following her more for a sense of place or a product that she has. So those are important elements to look for.
Yeah, and I also think it's about understanding the metrics behind influencers, right? So if you can't track all the way to attribution to say, if this influencer recommended or shared a link to our property, and within Google Analytics and some of the metric, analytic components, you can track certain components of that. So how much traffic did it drive to the website? What are some of the things that you're going to equate to success for that influencer? And making sure that they know that that's what they're being, paid and rewarded on, and that you're comfortable with that as well. Because you don't want to necessarily say, well, I need you to do X, and they can only do Y, and then you have a mismanaged relationship that could maybe sour. So thinking about how far an influencer can get you and what your analytical capabilities are to make sure you can track and report back on that. Does that make sense?
Just as a follow-up, I would say that I think something that was significant is your point about alignment. Having worked at other hotels in the past, we had also worked with her, but didn't see that sort of engagement. So I think there it's the qualification process, and I'm also going to that of how do you find people? And I would say the other brand I worked with, she was probably more aspirational.
Sure.
So it didn't resonate as well. But just amid the thousands of requests that we get,
Right.
who resonates or who do you seek out? So.
Yeah, and you know, influence. I mean, it's we could do a whole session on this, and I'm sure you already have. Okay, let's 1 o'clock. We'll come back. But my comment about influencers, I think, as well, is there's aspirational influencers, as you suggested, and there's rationale and reasoning behind using those. There's also, and from my standpoint, I think it's more about using, you know, influencers and people who are actually relevant, or maybe even people that they would you know, interact with. So, for example, because I love them, the Montage, Chef Strong, who's the chef at Studio in Montage Laguna Beach, like he is become, and I don't know if this is, I can't speak for them because I don't know if they've encouraged this or it's been on his own accord, but he's on Today's Show. He's kind of become a bit more of like a little bit of a local celebrity, which I would imagine, and I don't know, but we could, you know, dig into this with them. You know, how does that then translate it into additional, whether that's website volume, social activity, like there's all those different metrics that you can look into and try to tie it back to the content that includes him. But again, that's just sort of from my anecdotal perception of following him in that hotel. But I think it's a really important question, and I'm sorry I can't answer it very specifically right here, but I think it's part of the dialogue that people need to be having, because level setting expectations is worse than bad data, right? I mean, that can kind of be just totally derail the whole thing. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Celia, and I'm with Briggs & Riley Luggage. So I have a question.
Sure.
We are deeply embedded, if you will, with influencers, micro-influencers on a global basis. So my question to you is there any rhyme or reason or thinking behind how long do you keep a influencer in play for your brand until you realize not working? Is there any sort of, I'm going to say, secret sauce? Because, you know, that's one thing. We don't have a problem finding the micro-influencers or the brand ambassadors for our company. But how long do you, when do you say, not working, should it be 6 months, 2 months, 3 months? Again, it goes back to seeding the market, which is all of my team, we all wear our dungarees and we seed quite frequently. But when do you know?
Yeah,
how do you know?
Sure, I have a couple thoughts on that. I think, I'm not going to say you know at X point because it's obviously going to vary, but I think the things you need to think about it with are, one, I'm a firm believer that within that context, you should probably be doing multiple influences at once, because then the ability to measure and compare and contrast who's actually getting you what you want is a bit more uniform because it's in the same time frame, perhaps on the same promotion, and so on and so forth. Again, whether or not you have to deal with exclusivity and things like that is a whole other conversation, but being able to have multiple variants or variables within a given time frame and a given program or campaign allows you to actually compare and contrast against a metric that's more important, like XYZ, whatever it is you decide to do. When it comes to actual duration, I think that's also going to be dependent on what you've asked them to do in the context of that campaign. So if it's a seasonal campaign that's going to run for 3 months, I think you need to let it run the whole season and sort of see what it looks like. If it's kind of just an ongoing, we want to work with an influencer because we think it can help the brand, I think, I mean, you know, I think depending, again, to the previous question of like, what's the overall sales life cycle, or sort of what are you trying to get to at the end, I think you have to give it probably 3 to 6 months to kind of understand and be able to tie metrics and look at a couple cycles of things. So if this is actually a nice tie-in, if you go to the next slide, Catalonia Hotels is one of our customer groups as well, and they do a lot of this, and they actually are pretty adamant and religious about actually monitoring on a weekly basis all of their content campaigns and things like that, because it allows them to track and sort of, you know, whereas sometimes people maybe go quarterly or monthly or whatever the case may be, they have a pretty diligent way to monitor, and it's part of their team bandwidth and what their responsibilities are, because it makes sure that they can continually update that and kind of move through a cycle in a way that's not just full of guessing game, but is actually pretty much based on data. And that's looking at everything within Sprout, obviously, very specifically to each individual sent message and the data and the reports that look at what times of day were the most popular messages, or did they get, what times of day got the most engagement on certain messages for certain people or influencers or certain content. I mean, there's a lot of data that you can drill into, both by profile and also by network. And then there's also aggregate data that you can look into, say that says, okay, across a week of content or a week of engagement, we saw X on Facebook, Y on Instagram, and Z on Twitter. Like, what are the other networks?
And then just jumping in real quick,
Yeah.
Jackie from LDPR, as everybody I hope knows by now. We are actually going to be doing an influencer marketing panel at 1 p.m. that's going to be addressing how to best work with influencers, how to track ROI, how to understand and how to call out if those influencers are actually going to be helpful or if they're going to just those fake people who say they have 1 million followers and further on. So stay tuned for that at 1 p.m. for any influencer questions.
And I would also say, just as you think about the kinds of content, like I was mentioning earlier, what you're measuring against, measure that kind of influencer content against some of the, maybe the own content that you guys are putting out there, the campaigns that you're running across different formats, because I think that there's a tendency to believe and to think that like influencer is sort of this end-all, be-all magic potion, and I think that there's an element to it that should be incorporated if it makes sense, but I don't think that you can rest all your laurels on that or sort of put all your eggs in that basket, because again, you're not totally in control of it. So just thinking through that contextually, again, probably better for the 1 o'clock session, but I'm not on that one, so this is what you get. Any other questions about some of the questions or the metrics or things that we're thinking through? The other thing I wanted to think about and talk through a bit more tactically is some of the data that I think you should be analyzing and looking at to determine what's successful. And I sort of broke it into 3 categories, because I do think that reporting offers very good refinement opportunities in that you're not necessarily gonna have to reinvent the wheel day over day. You may certainly make changes quarter on quarter, year on year to your program, but I think that and it sounds like it maybe contradicts what I said earlier, but I think they do have to work in tandem. The things you can do on a very day-to-day, post-by-post content level basis is actually really important as well, because it gets you some of that data and insight that you can use to have a conversation with the boss, or to prove a point, or to test something. So if you think about content analysis, analyzing previous content and conversations to identify trends, like I talked about before, that are relevant and important to what you're trying to accomplish is super super practical, because it also helps you maybe resolve issues of what you should not be doing. I think there's a tendency to say, okay, this works, I want to keep doing more of it. There is a huge rationale behind using data to understand what is not working and just get rid of it because it's wasting your time and your bandwidth. Thinking about network data and going specific, I mentioned this as well, but really reviewing that data to provide some performance insight into what works on a certain network. I think we see, and I see this a lot as a part of my job working with the networks themselves, there's a lot of sort of behavioral shifts that can happen pretty quick, right? Didn't Kendall Jenner be like, I'm done with Snapchatting, and it was like, so there's the idea that behaviors can change pretty quickly. So knowing what's important and what drives value on each individual network is really important. So what do you want to do when it comes to, we see a lot of customer care on Twitter, right? Because it's live, it's real time, it's a very good place where people can either publicly or in DM talk to a customer service agent and get some answers resolved pretty quickly. We see a lot of promotions and things like that a bit more on Facebook, again, because of the community and the kinds of things that they're looking for. So understanding those differences based on the goals that you have and what you're trying to do in totality is a good thing. And then location data. This is another thing that I think is underutilized as well, and it's probably very important for your industry. If you think about the geographical data that you have at your fingertips within the networks based on where people are posting, whether that's everything from location tags to, on Instagram, where the stories are, all the sorts of stuff that you think is important, because it also helps you decide what are they doing while they're there, again, for travel and hospitality if you're a hotel. What are they doing while they're on property, but what are they also doing to talk about you or to think about you, engage with you prior and after, before and after a visit, because that, again, can be extremely important and help make the difference between this was a good experience, this was a great experience. So understanding the analysis, and even, as an example, thinking through and doing some ROI around, or some analysis and data around 3 months worth of content or engagements. How many of those were from when people were actually at a property versus how many of those were before or after, right? That's an interesting data point that maybe influences how, how and when you surface certain kinds of content, or when you have people staffed, or the kinds of people you have staffed on social. I think that's a whole nother data-driven decision-making process that we haven't touched on yet. But understanding who needs to be monitoring social based on the kinds of content, the kinds of questions that they have that need to be answered, right? So if you think about customer care, one of the things that we're able to do within Sprout, and other vendors as well, but typically is the ability to sort of understand, okay, if you've got a team of 15 people, when are they most active? What's their sort of volume of social conversations and responses, and all the sort of the engagement report for individuals that are on your team or that are working for your brand, whether that's at a corporate level or potentially at an individual property level. That's data that's really useful that maybe people aren't thinking about. What are the decisions you can make around staffing, around resources, around how you have to educate teams in terms of your best practices and how you want to be perceived on social. So there's a whole nother sort of level of data analysis that I think provides ROI in a different context, but also helps, I think, make for stronger and more sophisticated social programs in general. Does that make sense as well? Cool. So this is sort of all I have prepared. What I think, again, I don't mean to, they don't pay me, I swear to God, I'm not an influencer. But I think acknowledgement. I talked earlier about sort of, the additive properties of luxury and what that looks like, and certainly the value that can be provided when you do that. But one of the things I think is really important in social is as much one-to-one engagement as possible, and that is things you can measure, right? How many inbound conversations or messages do we get, and how many do we respond to? Trying to get to 100 is an important metric, right? We're answering everything that comes into us, whether it's positive, neutral, or negative. But this is just a couple examples of when I post when I'm there, and the fact that I literally think every post I've ever done while I am at a Montage property, they've responded to, made some sort of comment, and it just, I don't know why, it makes me feel better, right? It makes me feel acknowledged and seen and heard, and that they know I'm there. Whether that translates to better service and sort of an overall experience, I think obviously is up to the individual and how they want to take it. But for me, I think it matters. And maybe it's because of the business I'm in, but you're all in the same kind of business, right? So I think it is important. That was another one. I said California daydreaming, and they're like, we hope your dreams come true, right? So there's like, I don't know, it's cheesy, right, in some ways, but it also is the human component that I think we can't forget when it comes to social and when it comes to what we're doing as companies and as brands, because especially in your industry, you're providing, like we said earlier, such an emotional component, hopefully, to their lives, and that's a real opportunity to make an impact and create lasting relationships and loyalty. Question? Sure. Oh, wait. We're going to announce the question via Twitter.
Thank you. Our question is from Pamela from Abercrombie & Kent, and she wants to know, what are proven ways to encourage more user-generated content?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think UGC is something that I think obviously happens all the time. Whether or not people want you to use their content is a whole other question. I think first and foremost, really understanding as a business and as a team or as marketers, understanding like what kind of content would be helpful and useful for you. 2, understanding rules of engagement in terms of how you would go about communicating and requesting that kind of content. 3, certainly thinking about like the legal ramifications and working through your team of actually just using content from a proprietary standpoint. And then 4th, similar to some of the tactics I said, thinking about the measurement and understanding and tracking, what kind of user-generated content outperforms the others. What maybe from a standpoint of tracking, sort of what medium is more viable or more interesting to people? Is it videos? And if so, then maybe you're running maybe more of a video contest or requesting, submit your videos and things like that. So just sort of thinking through the logistical considerations around UGC and just making sure that you have permission and that sort of thing, I think is paramount. And also within the context of that, very tactically thinking about, making sure you're arranging, if you're going to use someone's post, for how long, that all the sort of the details I think is important, because that again, outside of the UGC conversation, could turn into something that's a bit more of a personally emotional, issue or connection point to your brand. So thinking through that. Is that helpful? Cool. That's all I have that's prepared. I have no idea what time it is, or how much time I have left, but I'm happy to take additional questions and talk through things.
aside from Montage,
Yes.
which we now know
Yeah.
does a great job, can you think of other brands in the travel space that you think are doing a really terrific job with their social media, with the way they're interacting and engaging with their customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can speak to, like I mentioned, Catalonia, obviously. I think Hyatt traditionally has done a great job around their properties, around both sort of at the corporate level, but also having people on the ground at every single property, thinking through and being able and being responsible for, to some degree, social conversations at that very the individual property level. I think from an airline standpoint, maybe a little bit more difficult. Again, because it's so customer. Porter Airlines is a great airline that I think out of Canada that does a lot of interesting and innovative things. Yeah, I probably have a bunch more examples. I can think of a few others later. I think the other thing I think about examples and sort of what, especially in your space, it's very personal, right? What you react to, both in terms of you know, the style, the colors, luxury in general as a category outside of travel is very emotional and sort of very personal, and then travel is very personal. So when you combine the two, I think what resonates and what people react to is going to be very dependent on what they value as an individual. Is it opulence? Is it understatement? Is it, you know, all that sort of thing? I think how you then reflect that into your brands, into the knowing who you are as a company, as a brand, and what you offer, and reflecting that in your social appearance and programming is very important, because you want a consistent experience and sort of, you know, brand throughout offline, online, offline, that sort of thing. Yeah. Other questions? Things I didn't talk about?
Time for one more question before the lunch break. Does anybody have it? No? Are we all set? Sure.
I wanted to add to your story. This was like 6 or 7 years ago. I tweeted out that we were going to be visiting Sugar Ridge, which is a hotel in Antigua. And they tweeted back, but when I got to the hotel room and we first checked in, they had a bottle of champagne in the room and a little note that said, "Thank you so much for your tweet." And this was like 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So I just think, you know, like you're saying, like they took social and they brought it in-house. And then, of course, what did I do? I posted it back on social. Yeah. So it was like a full cycle. It's very cyclical, I think, when you do it in an organic way.
I agree.
Excuse me. Hi, Yvonne
Hi.
Briggs and Riley. So my question is kind of just more tactical and logistical.
Mm-hmm.
Are you finding that these properties, and I'm trying to think of it from an actual product perspective, when it comes to social and people, customers reaching out on social to ask questions and customer service, are you finding that these properties are set up where their social department is taking care of answering these customer questions, or is it a customer service rep monitoring social channels to interact with the customer? I'm curious to hear
It's
your...
like the $1 million question.
Yeah.
And it's a question and a pain point for companies of all kinds, literally, quite frankly. It varies. There's sort of three modules that I think we see. One, we see that it's all in-house at sort of a corporate social level, and they're the social, the marketing teams, and that sort of things that are kind of the front lines on social. They may in turn, you know, task questions or sort of things to a customer service team, but they remain the ones on the front line. The second model would be that we see customer service teams being trained and operated and used, and in this case, you know, our platform obviously, and they are also on the front lines just as they are with phone, email, live chat, so on and so forth, and they're actually the ones, you know, doing the response. The third is that sometimes it's outsourced as well to an agency and things like that. I think a couple of things to think about when you're making those decisions. One, you have to figure out what you're comfortable with in terms of who those teams are and what their knowledge base is, especially when it comes to customer service and the kinds of questions you get. Because the worst experience is getting in front of one person and they're being like, "I don't know," and you get passed back and forth, right? Like, so if it is more effective and potentially more cost effective and just beneficial for you to train your social teams on all of the inside data and information you would need to be able to do customer service well, that's an option. I think the reverse, the opposite tends to be the better way to go, in that because just human nature, a lot of us are doing social and have some propensity to behave socially. Getting the customer service teams who already have that wealth of knowledge and all the data and the details and the process and the platforms and the systems, even from a customer service standpoint, at their fingertips, and bringing them into the social fold tends to be, I don't have a percentage, but tends to be probably the more predominant way to go. But I think you have to be fully aligned across the board with both teams so that people know what they should be responding to and what they should be not responding to. So there's a communication layer and a structural layer there that I think is paramount whichever way you go. Of course.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much.
My
I think
pleasure.
that was all very informative. What do you guys think?
That's me. I'm happy to take questions, after this and also on Twitter. So thank you.
All right, so now is the time where I'm sure everyone's really hungry right now. And we have a Michelin star chef, Chef Sean, and our Sean from Thin Pig Media, who will be leading a food interactive session during the lunch session. We have some really great food out there, and they look beautiful on top of that. So what we're going to be doing is I would like everybody to please go grab lunch outside, and then we'll bring it back over here, and then we'll showcase on our iPhone how to take the best photo, because I'm sure everybody wants to know how to do that. So please don't eat your food all the way. I know it's really hungry, but just try to save it for one picture at least, and we'll make it a little bit more interactive. So please feel free to take a bathroom break now, grab your lunch, and then we'll start in about 10 to 15 minutes. Just put it on.
Now, the question is, will I get any inappropriate texts during the, yeah.
Turn off your messages.
I'm just kidding. Nobody actually wants to talk to me.
Do you want to try it out and see if it goes in the monitor first?
Yeah, right. Except I have to be connected to the Wi-Fi. Yeah, but it's still the internet, right? Is that coming through?
Oh.
Can you see it on your desktop?
No, but maybe I don't have the right thing on.
Oh. I think that's the icon for it, and you might know the next one.
Awesome.
All right, cool. Okay.
Do you want me to connect it?
Huh? Yeah, sure. I'll just turn off my phone for the moment.
I'll put the, I don't know how to put this away, but.
Oh, does it still show my screen even when I turn it off?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. That's cool.
Just don't do anything. It's good. That's all I
Just like make a blank screen here. This is going to be kind of tough to do this while also holding the microphone. This will be
I can hold that microphone.
Oh, really?
Sean will be here as well, but I can hold the microphone.
Okay. Oh, no, I was just going to ask, are you introducing Sean?
Yeah, I was just
What's he planning on talking about?
I was going to ask you to describe the issues.
The other thing that maybe we could ask him about is what he thinks about when he's like plating a dish.
Sure.
That kind of goes into that's like the first step, right? Is it plated well? So. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, how's everyone enjoying the food so far? Great. Well, we have the pleasure of having two Seans introduce us about how to do the best photos on their iPhone with the photography. We have Michelin star chef, Chef Sean. If you want to go right over here, that'd be perfect. And then, of course, Sean, who you've met before on a panelist from Oblong Pixel as well. So I'll let them take it away.
I'm going to stand out of the actual... Oh, no, you got to be right here for the live stream.
So, Chef Sean, could you please explain to us what you prepared for us today?
You know, in preparation today, you got to think about Instagram, right? And I think that clearly it has to taste good. Beets is something that's, everyone's sort of like in love with beets, and I think it's also all year-round seasonality situation. You know, when I composed the dishes, I thought not everyone's going to eat seafood, not everyone's going to eat meat. Vegetarian's good, and obviously everyone likes dessert. So peaches are in season, beets are in season. I think shrimp's kind of a no-brainer, and right now the cherry tomatoes and obviously the rest of the ingredients are very much at their ripeness and at their peak, right? Then you start to think about composition, and the reason why they're all in the same bowls is I thought that you want to have a look at really the color profiles and the textures and the natural beauty of what's in the plate. So the bowl to me wasn't the most important thing, it was more so the ingredients that go inside. Coordination of flavor is a very sort of basic thing for a chef, right? You learn what tastes good and what doesn't taste good, and the textures meld in together. But then it's the artistry by using nature to be able to understand how you're going to highlight. And you know, when you take that photo and you post it on Instagram, and I posted a little bit on Instagram, you really have to understand there's a face to the way that the dish looks. There's depth, and then there's also the color profiles, and then obviously the adjustments to make sure that when you do post it, that it fits in that little box. So it's a rectangle or a square. So all those things go through my mind, and then I start to think about, you know, 6 and 12, so there's a face. So number 6 is where it's going to face the guest, and 12 is going to be away. So that's really what it's about, and hopefully it just tastes good as well.
And what dish are we going to take a photo of today?
This is actually Gulf prawns, and we marinate with a little bit of garlic and parsley. There's a sauce in the front, which is made out of a little bit of a secret recipe from home. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And then you have an avocado puree, dehydrated tomatoes, and some pea tendrils. Now, the saffron chip at the back is basically made out of tapioca. We dehydrate it, and then what we do is fry it, so you have that textural aspect to it as well. I really love this. It's great color. It's really good to eat. Most people like shrimps if they don't have the allergy, and I think it's one of those sort of very comforting flavor profiles, you know, avocado and prawns.
Well, great. Thank you so much.
And Sean talk now? Or?
And Sean, lead the way.
All right. So, yeah, I'll give you a quick little demonstration here. So first thing you got to do when you're embracing your inner millennial and taking photos of your food and probably annoying everybody else in the restaurant, but totally worth it. All right, just do it. First thing you got to really take into account is where are you? Are you in a fancy restaurant, or are you in some like sketchy gravel parking lot with your local taco truck? Okay, so the food's going to come out very differently. In this case, we're kind of spoiled because the awesome chef has done all the work for us. He's made it look beautiful for us. We don't have to even think about that. So the next thing, oh yeah, so I only have 2 hands, so I need help with the microphone here. So the next thing you need to consider is what's the light like? So it's awesome because the clouds just moved in and completely took away all of our beautiful natural light. So normally that's what you want to go for, is you want to get as close to the window as you can. All of the big like food Instagrammers and stuff with the big followings, they're very, very particular about where in the restaurant they sit. They're always being annoying and saying, no, can I get the table over there by the window, please? Because that's the beautiful natural light. Most of this orange, incandescent light inside, it's really gross, and it does not make the food look flattering at all. So moving as close to the window as you can. Sometimes that doesn't work. You're in the bar at night with very low light. What you do is you get a friend over here with a phone, Ben, and you have them turn on their light. And you just bring that into the side, and it's not going to work from that far away, but you just have them come in, and you can actually use your friend's phone, because what you never want to do is use your own flash. Don't do that. That's like cardinal sin number 1. Don't do that. So you have somebody bring their light in, and that's going to add a little bit of extra oomph to your image. So then you got to decide, all right, what angle are you going to do? So there's two major types. There's, you're going to come in from this little angle back here, and you can hopefully, see it sideways there. So you can have some food lends itself to coming in at an angle like this. Let's say you have a big burger and you really want to highlight like how gigantic this is. You might want to get in low down here and kind of come at an upward angle there, and it's going to really just like make it look gigantic. You can also get really nice depth there if you want to highlight the restaurant you're in, give a little bit more context. It's Yeah, it's a little sideways there. Sorry, guys. But you get the idea. So, you come in like this, and we can see the nice little audience there in the background. But the one that's like the fail-safe is what's called a flat lay. So that's just the top-down style of image. So that's where you're just up here, and you want to make it look beautiful, right? So because there's not a ton of height to this dish, and because the bowl there is kind of blocking that sideways view, we're going to go with the flat lay for this. So the next thing you have to consider is what camera app you're using. This is probably the least important part of it. You can just use the standard camera app, and you're going to be totally fine. I use what's called Moment. It's by a company that makes camera phone lenses and stuff. But it gives you a little bit of extra control, and that can be helpful sometimes. So go ahead and focus in on, your food. Tap it to tell it where to focus. And then you're going to want to control the exposure. So you don't want it to be super bright and gross and blown out. And you also don't want it to be super dark. So you kind of just got to find where that nice middle point is that's going to give you the most bang for your buck there. Then you want to use the rule of thirds. So generally, you don't want it just right there in the middle. Sometimes that looks good. In this case, it actually does look good. If you have other items on the table, say you've got your silverware you want to use as props, you can kind of divide that up into thirds, and it's going to look good. Use your props sparingly, though. People get a little carried away with a lot of it, and it's just distracting. It doesn't look great. The other thing when framing is you want to make sure you've got your subject in a good spot that isn't leading the eye out of the frame. So you get all these highlights on the rim of the bowl. The light parts of the photo are what really attract the eye first. And if those are on the edge, they're going out of the frame, you're just going to make people want to scroll past you that much faster because they've already moved on. So let's go with just a nice middle shot here. We'll take that. So once you have that, you're going to want to go into your editing app. So you can edit in Instagram, you can edit in your own photo app. What I use is an app called Filmborn, which is a really, really nice film emulation algorithm. So I'm going to go in there, I'm going to select the photo we just took. And I'm going to start with just emulating Fujifilm here. So the first thing you're going to want to do with any of your photos is make sure that contrast is nice. So I'm using what are called curves to add that. A lot of apps just have a contrast slider. You can up that or lower that. You want a nice style. You need to pick your style for Instagram. Are you going to be consistently a really contrasty look? Are you going to be a flatter look? Do you like really nice saturated colors? Whatever makes you happy, just go with that and stick to it. Consistency is really important, especially on something like Instagram, where people are looking at your profile when deciding whether to follow you. So you want to show them a consistent look that they can expect every time. So once you had a little bit of contrast, you play around with your saturation. That's going to be different depending on the foods. Right now we've got these beautiful greens in here, and we really want to highlight that, make that look good for people. You want it to look appetizing. Once you've got that to a place where you want it, and if you have more questions, you can talk to me later, you save your photo, and you're going to want to crop it. So for Instagram, it needs to either be square or 4x5. That's going to be your best options. And when you're cropping, keep in mind that even if you're doing a tall photo or a wide photo, in your profile, it's still going to be a square. So it needs to look good in both ways. So once you've got your cropping all in, you decided, this looks great, you're pretty much good to go. So there's plenty of other tips and tricks and whatnot, but that's the quick overview there. If you have already finished your food, you better go get some more or something. So yeah.
Well, great. Thank you so much. And I hope you guys enjoy the lunch. We'll be starting up soon with our influencer marketing panel shortly. I should also say, if anybody wants to try this out and you already ate your food, the Dominic actually set up some beautiful tables with the presentations outside. So if you want to take your stab at that and kind of share us the photos, it is on your bingo card, so you will get a point. And we can see what happens. Okay, how was everybody's lunch? Was it good? Great. So while we're waiting for the influencer marketing panel to set up, we just thought it'd be good to do a quick Q&A, as I feel like everybody has a lot of questions. So we have Sean and Ben back up here. Feel free to ask them any questions, and if it has anything to do with influencer marketing, we'll be touching on it during our panel. But if there's any other questions you may have from earlier presentations, just feel free to ask them.
There really are no stupid questions. Really.
Feel free to cheer as we're walking on stage.
Woo! We're so cool. I'm going to sit as far from Sean as I can.
Far away. No touching.
Makes us look really legit, I think.
Yeah. Andy? You had one job. Come on.
Hey,
buddy, there's a coffee cup right behind you. Sean, what kind of product do you use in your hair? No, we got one from Brooke. Ah.
All right, Sean, I want to hear more about YouTube because this is a area that we're expanding into, but like compared to like say Facebook, which I think they make it so friendly, right? For someone to come in who really doesn't have any ads experience and kind of set up a campaign and get going, how would you compare YouTube to a Facebook and getting started?
Yeah, so YouTube, for those of you that don't know, is run on the Google ad network, so you have to use AdWords to run those, which is definitely more intimidating than getting started with a Facebook, especially if you're looking at like just boosting from the page itself, which is stupidly simple. But as intimidating as it is, you learn it pretty quickly. It's not as different as it looks. With YouTube, though, it's pretty frequently misunderstood what it is, because it is a social network, and a lot of people actually don't think of it that way. And so there's two kind of ways you can approach YouTube strategy-wise. There's the way that a lot of people are doing it now, which is really just to run your pre-roll ads and drive traffic to your site, just like so pre-roll ad. Thank you for asking, Ben. So pre-roll ad is those ads that run before a video. They pre-roll, and you can skip them after 5 seconds, which is awesome. Now this alone right here is the little secret of YouTube that makes it glorious that everybody overlooks. If somebody skips your pre-roll ad, you don't pay for that view. People have to watch at least 30 seconds or 100% of your ad if it's less than 30 seconds for you to pay for that view. But 5 seconds in the video world on a high engagement platform like YouTube, where people have their volume on, they're actively clicking to watch a video, 5 seconds is a great brand impression. You can get a lot across in 5 seconds and not have to pay for it. So you can really, really extend your reach for very cheaply. That's just a powerful thing that's overlooked. And that is great for driving traffic to your site. Now, I wouldn't recommend most people focus on driving traffic to the site from the YouTube campaign because it's a brand building thing. All right, people are there to watch another video. The likelihood of them actually clicking on a link to your site and not watching that awesome gaming video that they wanted to watch, that's pretty low. But you can get really powerful messages across to them that really stick in their heads. We consistently see, direct traffic increase as well as Google search traffic for branded terms increase dramatically when running a strong YouTube campaign. But the other side of it is going back to the YouTube as a social network. So if you want to get the most out of YouTube, you really want to treat YouTube like any other social platform. You want to build up that subscriber base. Because when you capture somebody as a subscriber, it's pretty equivalent to capturing someone's email. Anytime you post a video to your channel, all your subscribers are notified via email. They get told about these new videos. And so it's a really powerful way to stay connected to these people. And unlike Facebook, you don't have to pay every time you do these posts to get them to notified. They're just going to see that organically. So if you can focus on building that subscriber base with your ads and consistently posting to YouTube, that's amazing. It's a really powerful engine. But a lot of companies aren't really ready to tackle that kind of a content need, because you do have to consistently post there, and it has to be video. You can't get away with an image and some text, you know, like you can on other networks. So it's a little bit of a bigger undertaking from the organic side.
Would you say that by making an ad for YouTube, would most ads for YouTube also make a decent video for your own channel?
Yeah. So, you know, the ads generally make a great video. Now, if you're going to be posting regularly organically to YouTube, you're going to want some videos that are a little bit more in depth. YouTube, so everybody talks about how short videos need to be. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, it's got to be 15 seconds, you know, things like that. YouTube is actually the opposite. Engagement with 12-minute videos, that's like the average on YouTube, because a lot of YouTube engagement is how-to videos. It's, you know, tiny little YouTube stars posting their 15-minute videos about their day, which it's just obscene, guys. But it works for them, and people watch it. It's treated a lot more like TV. They will sit down for 15 to 30 minutes, and they will watch it. They will have something playing over lunch. So you actually don't want short content. You want longer stuff. You can actually get into the weeds on YouTube, and people will stick with it. One of the things that I like to say to people when I hear about how short videos need to be is that the reason most videos need to be short is honestly because they suck. They're really not that good. If you're just being self-promotional and not really delivering any value, then you got to be short with it, because nobody cares. If you tell an engaging story, if you give valuable content that people can use, they'll watch you for hours. They will stay with you. I mean, people still go to the movie theater and watch 3-hour movies, okay? People pay top dollar for that. You can do that type of content. Of course, you may not have millions of dollars to produce it, but if you are a good storyteller, people will watch your video. You know, we regularly produce 6 or 7 minute videos that are on all kinds of different platforms, and we're seeing, you know, 70% engagement rates with it. You know, it's just about keeping them entertained throughout the whole video, and approaching video in a different way too. Understanding that you can get analytics about it and see where people are dropping off and re-edit the video to make it better. I think that's really important to think about when you approach that kind of content. Yeah. Oh. Oh, very nice. Come on, Andy. Hop, hop.
All right, this question's from Matthew Dickey. All this talk of social and no mention of Google+. Is it really needed for SEO?
Is there a cricket emoji? Yeah, it's hard to overstate how Google Plus is not really worth anyone's time unless they're in a few different sectors. I think Google Plus is used a little closer to LinkedIn, honestly, these days, because
that's just mean to LinkedIn. Make that comparison.
Well, because some people use LinkedIn really as a social network. That's how they stay in touch with business colleagues. That's how they read articles about their own industry. They use it in a much more business-focused way, and I think Google Plus can be used that way. So for B2B, actually, I would recommend, at the very least, duplicating your efforts from LinkedIn onto Google Plus. And of course, you know, if you are what we call mirroring posts, if you have your new article and you're sharing it on Facebook and then you're repurposing it for Twitter and you're maybe making an Instagram post that hopefully will lead back to your website, yeah, sure. By all means, take the extra couple of minutes and update that on your Google Plus page as well. But I wouldn't put any money into ads, and I wouldn't necessarily check it every couple of hours. Some industries are going to be better at that than others, I think, because that's who's on Google Plus.
from the SEO perspective specifically, which is more of a core competency for me than social, actually. You know, what we see is you fill out your profile on there, you know, fill out your whole business profile, make it really robust, and you've basically just got 99% of the SEO benefit from it. You really don't need to be active on there. We don't recommend that to any of our clients anymore, and it hasn't hurt us. So that's, from the SEO perspective, it's once you fill out that profile, you're pretty much good to go.
Well, great. Thank you so much for answering additional questions. Really appreciate it. So without further ado, we are going to jump to our influencer marketing panel. So we have some really great speakers here today, a wide range from digital agencies to influencer to the legal side of it as well, to kind of understand what influencer contracts look like. So we have Merv Bailey from Sway, who is here today as well. We have Pavana Kumar from Davis & Gilbert, which is a law firm here in New York City. And then we have Alexa, who is this really great food and travel influencer. Her handle is Eating NYC. Follow her. But she's really great. And then we, of course, have Laura Davidson, who will be our moderator here today as well. So without further ado, I welcome them up on stage.
We're missing one. Feel free to. Yeah. Okay. We're just waiting for Merv. Merv.
Welcome.
Okay. So I know influencer.
So sorry, just real quickly, for any questions, if you can hold them till the end of the panel, we'll be able to pass the mic around so we can actually hear and the people live streaming can hear as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think, as you can see, we have 3 panelists with 3 areas of specialization and 3 topics that are very important to all of us. And I know from Sharon's question earlier and everybody's conversations on the side, influencer marketing is a big topic right now. And for all of my clients out there who are listening and watching on YouTube, it's called influencer marketing for a reason. And I think I've been saying to so many people this year, I spoke on this at the New York Times Travel Show in January, that PR can help drive this, but it really needs to be part of the overall marketing equation, because there are influencers that we can just send to various places who are writing on their blogs or they're influencers and they don't require payment, and it's just a very small part of what we're doing. And then there are bigger influencer marketing programs. So it's a very big topic. So let's kick it off with Merv, whose company does a lot of influencer marketing programs for big brands. And I think the big question that everybody asks is, how do you determine which influencer is right for your brand?
Yeah, so one of the very first things that we look at is there a natural brand affinity? Are they in the space that you're looking to activate? Do they have an audience that looks like the audience that you're looking to reach? Are they creating content that's in line with the quality that your brand is out to achieve? And then also, sort of transparency around their audience data. Do they have what may appear on the surface as the audience that you need? Is that backed up by their data and who they're actually able to reach?
And then once you work with an influencer for a brand, how do you determine the ROI on that? Or how do you determine if it's been effective for the companies that you represent?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to set very clear goals and expectations up front around what success means. And that can be a ton of different things. So whether it's an awareness campaign, whether it's a product launch where you're able to track swipe ups or click throughs or things like that. So it's important to define that up front, put a plan in place to be able to measure it, and have very clear KPIs and objectives, and then be able to, at the end of the day, put a report card together.
So I want to give one example, and then I'd love if you gave an example as well. We talk about macro influencers and micro influencers, right? And it used to be everybody said, well, you know, this person's numbers are only 25,000 followers. Maybe they're not so good for us. Get me somebody with 500,000 followers. But correct me if I'm wrong, it's all about the engagement, right? And it's not just about the numbers. And a couple years ago, we sent a micro-influencer, Kim Marie Evans from Luxury Travel Mom, who we all work with, everybody knows, to a resort in the Caribbean called Curtin Bluff. Hopefully they're listening. And she has such an incredible following in the Northeast, specifically in the New York and Connecticut area, which is a target market for them. And I have to tell you, 6 months after she posted a whole series of stories, I was on vacation at the resort and I ran into 5 women, all from Westchester County, who had booked their family vacations from her trip. Each one of them was down there with their families. That it must have been a $10,000 booking per family. So that's a $50,000 event that's happening based on that one post. And that was just all that I physically tracked. So I don't know if you have an example. How do you actually work with your clients to track? I mean, for a small resort like that, they could easily track through their reservations department how many bookings they got from what she did. But in general, how are people, especially in the travel world, able to track the effectiveness of someone they're working with?
Yeah, well, and I think it's important also, you know, we use the term creator in place of influencer a lot of times. So it's, you know, although these folks are considered media channels, it's important to look at them as a content partner as well, and their ability to, you know, create content native to the platform of incredible quality that's super engaging, and the value of that beyond their reach. So it's not just a targeted media buy at a CPM, but also that value of the content that they bring to the table that our clients then leverage as part of their own work and push through, whether it's boosting their posts, whether it's taking those assets and creating a whole campaign around it. So there's tremendous value there. In terms of direct bookings, ROIs, I mean, you know, going back to attribution, to trying to track through the click, to, you know, promo codes that they share. There's a number of ways that you can do that.
So now let's speak with a real live influencer on our panel. Alexa, do you want to talk a little bit about what you do and how you determine who you're going to work with? I'm sure you're approached by a lot of brands, and you don't work with everyone who approaches you. Do you proactively seek out certain types of brands to work with? How do you determine who you're going to work with, and what does that look like?
Right, so I started Eating NYC primarily as a food platform covering dining in New York. And since I started about 4.5 years ago, I expanded into the travel space and have had the opportunity to work with a lot of different hotels and restaurants. And it's been definitely a learning process, I'm sure, as the influencer space has been for all of us here, because everything is constantly changing. What the rules are, what's appealing, what's not appealing. So definitely my opinions and my learning curve has changed over the past years. But in terms of working with hotels and restaurants, I think most importantly is the hotel or the restaurant, is it somewhere that I want to go? Is it somewhere that I would want to go to on my own? My followers, my demographics are primarily women in New York, in their 20s and 30s, right? So I always try to keep that in mind, which of course is great for me because that's, I'm a 20-something in New York as well. But, just seeing, is this, if this hotel has a great dining program, do they have a great chef, who's starting something new or a new opening in terms of, I don't know, I was working with someone a few weeks ago who, wanted me to go to a hotel that specializes, had a great casino, and, I had to make the decision, that wasn't for me. That's actually not something I'm interested in, so it's not really going to be a fit for my followers because it's not going to be genuine and authentic. It's not something that would get me excited. So everything is really, case-by-case basis, and I say personal interest is really the first and most important factor that goes into working with brands.
And what about paid programs versus you just deciding you're going to go check out a new restaurant that you heard was really hot that you want to go?
So the restaurant space and the hotel space, I think, is kind of different, especially here in New York, where everything is so saturated, the influencer space. For me personally, I don't work with restaurants on a paid basis unless it's, you know, huge corporation or company, or, you know, a large franchise. I think part of what I deliver is authenticity and, you know, loyal, updated reviews of restaurants that have just opened, and it's really important to my brand that I'm just going to places and reporting live very authentically. In terms of travel, I think that space has changed a lot as well. I'm seeing more paid opportunities for travel than I have before, and I'm still kind of trying to navigate how it works on the PR side or on the travel side, you know, what makes the hotel, you know, want to pay an influencer versus not. I think, you know, it's also tricky because that is an experience as well. So, you know, in terms of authenticity, you really have to decide what works for you. But I see more often with tourism boards than hotels. You know, they have different programming in place. So,
a lot of the tourism boards are looking for ambassadors, right? Who they're paying. So let's get into the legal side of this a little bit, and then we'll come back to some other general influencer questions. I think everybody in this room knows that the FTC has gotten involved in our business, and you know, from the influencer side, you really now, if you're getting paid, you have to indicate that it's a paid gig. I mean, people have hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored or partner. And from the marketing side and the PR side, we need contracts and strict agreements to cover ourselves and cover our clients. And that's why we asked Pamela to join our panel, because this must be changing every 6 months, if not sooner. And you are the expert on this, so I thought maybe you could speak to that. What's happening with the industry now? What do those of us in the room need to know moving forward?
Sure, absolutely. So by way of a brief overview, I think it's important to note that the FTC's regulation of representations in advertising, and specifically false and misleading advertising, you know, that's nothing new. There are guidelines regarding endorsements and testimonials, which influencer marketing falls under, was set out in 2009. And the key principle is really the same, which is that if there's a material connection between an endorser and a brand that would materially affect the weight that a consumer would then give to that person's opinion and affect their purchasing decision accordingly, then that connection has to be disclosed. So, you know, would your opinion be different about whether to purchase a product if you knew the person had been paid to make a certain statement? You know, we'll get into, you know, whether or not those statements are authentic and honest. They may well be. But in the eyes of the FTC, that connection would still need to be disclosed. And that connection could be payment, but it could also be loaner product, it could be an experience, it could be a free trip to a hotel, to an event, something like that, so, or any other kind of in-kind benefit. So it really goes above and beyond payment. What we have been seeing in terms of how it's changing and evolving is really how the FTC has tried to keep up with new media and social media in particular. So, you know, after 2009 and 2015, the FTC updated its FAQs to the endorsement guides to cover specifically how do you make disclosures in social media. That's where the hashtag ad, the hashtag sponsored comes in. But then even more recently than that, in the last year or so, you know, how are we making disclosures on Instagram or Snapchat stories? How do we make sure that these disclosures are really clear and conspicuous to consumers? And the FTC, for example, in just the last few months has made clear that they don't think we can rely on the handshake tool on Facebook or the paid partnership tool on Instagram. And so part of what we do is really get into the weeds and get granular with what the FTC has said, both formally but also informally in talks with our firm. We have a sense of where they land on certain issues to make sure that influencers are disclosing in practice in a way that the FTC would think is adequate. So that's the practical side. And then on the contract side, you know, we make sure that that's all being codified in the influencer contracts. I think there's a degree of practicality to that too. You know, how do we communicate it to influencers so they really understand how to disclose rather than handing them a paragraph saying, you must comply with the FTC, which may not mean much, especially to a lot of micro-influencers. But then also maybe looking at their posts, making sure that it's happening. And then, you know, even aside from disclosure, looking at the contracts to cover other issues like, what do you do? Do you have any recourse if you've engaged a micro-influencer for your fried chicken brand and then the day before the shoot goes live, they announce in social they're becoming a vegan. You know, that's actually a real case study that I dealt with, and it was funny. We looked at the contract, and the only recourse we had to terminate was they did something that was actively disparaging to the brand. So, you know, we don't want to get too caught up in the legalese sometimes. It depends on the value of the deal, who the influencer is, but these are things we need to think about. I think also contractually, we're looking a lot closer at morals and behavior clauses in light of the Me Too era. You know, oftentimes you'll only have the right to terminate someone if they do something that, you know, reflects poorly on the brand during the term of their engagement. But now we're thinking more about what if something that they did 10 years ago comes up during the term of the engagement and it reduces the commercial value of the influencer. So these are things we try to think through on a practical basis with our clients, both in light of the FTC guidance and then also in light of just, you know, any other kinds of issues that might come up with influencers.
So for everybody in this room and those who are watching on YouTube, it's really important to know that if we're paying an influencer to visit a hotel or one of our destinations, after we've got the contracts and everything else, if we see that they're posting and they haven't put in a hashtag or indicated that they've been paid or that it's a sponsorship or an ad, we have to then ask them to start doing that, right?
That's correct. So the FTC's position on this has really been codified in its enforcement actions against companies who don't instruct their influencers to do so. You know, the overall guidance is that companies should be reasonably monitoring their influencers to make sure that they're making these disclosures. And if something comes to the company's attention, you should give the influencer an opportunity to cure it, to add the disclosure, and then, you know, take appropriate steps if they're not doing so. You know, often we'll hear from companies, well, we didn't tell the influencer to post. We paid for their trip, we told them to post 3 times, and then they actually posted 5 times because they liked the experience so much. You know, I've heard informally from the FTC they consider that to still fall under the ambit of the material connection. They have made clearer in recent years and recent warning letters sent to both marketers and the influencers that they do look to all parties to ensure compliance. So in certain situations, maybe they would say that's more of the influencer's responsibility, but I think it's really something that all parties should work together to make sure is happening. And another thing I would add too is that, you know, if we're paying an influencer to go out and really post in a commercial capacity, the FTC doesn't view that as the same as, you know, a magazine editor in a truly editorial capacity being paid to, for example, attend a press conference or something like that. That's a gray area I often get a lot of questions about. But for true influencer marketing, that kind of connection would still need to be disclosed.
Interesting. And so now that I'm thinking legalese, I'm thinking fraud, right? Influencer fraud. I mean, this is, and Murph, I'm going to ask you to chime on this too. I mean, I know at LDPR we try our hardest to really curate a list of influencers that we've worked with, that are credible, that are producing. But there are more and more influencers out there that we don't know. And, you know, somebody comes to you and they say, well, I have 1 million followers and look, my engagement, you know, 35,000 people commenting on this, and then somebody on the side will say, you know, he's fake, and those aren't real engagements. He's got some sort of program that's doing that. And of course, I have no idea. I do not even understand how that works. But how do you get around that? How can you tell if somebody is legitimate or if they've just got bots, you know, clicking wow on everything that they post?
A lot of fakers out there, for sure. And so, you know, there are certain cues at a very high level that you can look at, and to determine kind of taking a sample that maybe someone has followers that aren't real people, and then there's a much more thorough way, which we're actually working on. Our agency has recently brought on a handful of data scientists and software engineers to develop a tool that can assess and analyze, that's a new one, analyze influencers' audience to create an audience quality score, as we're calling it, so that that person with 1 million followers, you know, may only have 180,000 true human beings that are following them. So when they come to you and say, you know, pay me based on this audience, you're able to essentially come back to them with some questions, at least, to say, can you help, you know, clear up the fact that when we look at your audience growth, you went from 1,800 to 50,000, from 50,000 to 500,000, in a day type of thing. And if you can't correlate that to being on Oprah or Dr. Phil or something spectacular, you at least have some ammunition to say, what happened here? What's going on? And if they're legit, they'll very easily be able to point to that article or that piece of media that boosted their audience way up. If not, then I would have serious questions about that.
And then Pavana, you said something that is it the Attorney General is now looking into this?
That's right. So the New York AG is actually currently investigating a number of firms that aid in selling fake followers. They use, partially people have hired and partially bots. And I think to your point, it's very important to be on the lookout for that because it is being actively investigated. The FTC is also involved in fraud in a slightly tangential space where people are using kind of random celebrity comments and implying that they're actually paid endorsements and creating pages where they imply these celebrities and other people are real influencers. Obviously, that raises separate issues in terms of the celebrities complaining, but it's another form of fraud that's being actively regulated, so we should be especially careful about it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all over it's all over the press right now. P&G, it came out that their whole influencer program was just absolutely full of these bots and these non-humans, and that their media spend was essentially wasted on nothing and computers clicking a like button and giving a thumbs up in a comment. And so it's a big deal, and it's sort of the latest as we move away from fraud around programmatic and display and things like that. Now it's sort of our time to address it in the influencer space.
All good info, and I'd like to now turn it and talk about what's working in the space and maybe give some examples, and maybe you can start with that because what you're doing is working. You have a lot of followers, you have really good engagement. Do you want to talk about the way you work and some of your colleagues who are doing it right?
Sure. So are you talking from a contractual standpoint or just in general? So I guess for me how it works with restaurants or travel opportunities, I think there's really a back and forth. I mean, a lot of people or influencers now have agents that they work with or managers. I personally don't. I do everything myself. I've heard a lot of mixed things about that. I'm also curious about what you guys think about working with an agent versus the influencer. But I think, in terms of the contracts, it's definitely changed a lot over the past years. Every day it's changing, every contract is different, but I think managing expectations is really important, and being very thorough about what you can deliver, what you can't deliver, what you're comfortable providing, and just being very thorough, because I've seen people go on trips and post from a different place that wasn't the hotel or something, and there are a lot of weird things that happen. But I think, just managing expectations and, once you do have that relationship with that person at the PR firm or that restaurateur, whatever it is, I think it makes everything a lot easier because, they know what, you're good at doing and what you're capable of, and just, working with people or firms that really know you and you know them kind of makes everything really great and saves everyone a lot of trouble, I guess.
I'll add to that. I mean, it's super important to build relationships with folks and long-term relationships, so that the idea that we're going to find someone and work with them on a one-off basis for 3 posts and try to measure success and ROI based on a tweet, an Instagram post, and a Facebook comment. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So, we've, over the past couple of years, have really started to push our clients towards building long-lasting, long-term, quality, close relationships with these folks to bring them into the creative process, to help them, come up with the core campaign ideas, and really sort of work hand in hand on what we're trying to accomplish.
Can you give an example of what you think is one of your more successful influencer campaigns?
Yeah, recently we work with the NFL, and so we activated the Patriots-Raiders game in Mexico City. And so they play a game there once a year. It was very important. Mexico is their second largest market outside of the U.S. It was important for them to both grow the audience fan base in Mexico as well as the U.S. Hispanic fan. So we put together sort of a three-tiered influencer program for the days leading up to the game and game day, which included micros, macro, and celebrity, and which is always it's always good to have a mix there. And basically, it was an experiential sort of handoff where we put these folks, again, emphasis on creators. You know, these are folks that have the ability to create really funny, in a lot of cases, great YouTube content or Instagram stories, or video is obviously the top of mind for all of our clients. Anyway, long story short, this was a small 5-figure campaign budget. We ended up delivering a little over $14 million in earned media value, hundreds of millions of impressions. Granted, one of the creators went viral with his attempt to give Tom Brady the national jersey on field at the end of the game, and that was picked up by all of the major media outlets. But, I mean, huge success for the NFL.
That's great. I want to give one example. It's a shout out to Melissa Rose, who I think is logging in on YouTube, and she handles all of the marketing partnerships for Destination New South Wales and Sydney. And Anna, you can correct me if I'm getting my details wrong, but what Melissa does so successfully is when she's looking at the entire marketing program, which will include advertising and a lot of other things, as part of an ad buy, and I don't remember if it was Travel and Leisure or Condé Nast Traveler, or maybe she did it with both at different times. As part of the ad buy, she looked at it as a marketing buy. And she said to them, okay, there'll be this much advertising between New South Wales and Qantas. Was there a competition too on digital? I can't remember if that was part of it. But a big part of it was, and we want a major influencer going down to Sydney to broadcast from the Vivid event, and that's part of the buy. We're not paying for that person, you're paying for that person. And we want to vet the influencer, which Anna did, to make sure that we knew this would be a good influencer. So in addition to the influencer posting from their own channels, both video and still images, the influencer also did a social media takeover on the Condé Nast handles and the Travel and Leisure handles. And that was all part of a marketing buy. And that is probably a great example of when we say influencer marketing, it wasn't just Anna from LDPR telling the influencer, we want you to post from Vivid Sydney and we want you to do this. It turned into, if our client is going to spend marketing dollars with this media company, how do we get some influencer value out of it? And the reach was huge. Between the influencer's own channels and reach was great in interaction, and then by taking over Condé Nast Traveler's handles, right, or Travel and Leisure's handles, you're reaching a whole nother market. And our client did not have to pay extra for it. Of course, Melissa will text me later whether I got all the details right. But the point is, you see how that becomes part of a whole marketing plan. And it's really important for PR, advertising, and marketing to talk, and digital, to all speak to each other. I know Briggs & Riley, you're great with that. You integrate, you involve everybody in the discussions. I think in our industry, it's still separated in a lot of areas where the PR agency is here, the internal team is there, advertising's doing what they want. You would think it's not still like that, but it is. So that's also another one of my messages. Everything is integrated, and you can get a lot more ROI on any investment when you're looking at all the different pieces of the puzzle. So I wanted to get that in there too. So I think we should open it up to questions, because we have 3 experts in different areas, and I'm sure people have some questions, so we can start. Oh,
who has a question?
Curious minds want to know, that's right. My question really is more for Pavana. You had mentioned, you were talking a little bit about celebrities and what you can and can't do, and there was a little bit of a discussion. My question is more, less on the influencer side, but more on the, if your brand is spotted on a celebrity is carrying it. I'll give you a perfect example, not to toot our own horn, but George Clooney has been spotted carrying Briggs & Riley luggage. So we're wondering, obviously he's not a paid sponsor, he's not an ambassador. This is purely organically, him carrying a bag. How do we leverage that from a social perspective? Can we do like a, hey, spotted, and a celeb watch, and how do you sort of navigate the legalese around that?
So that's a great question. It's less of an endorsement and testimonial question than a rights publicity question. So rights publicity regulate how you can use someone's likeness in a commercial context. The ultimate being that you generally cannot do that in a commercial context without the person's permission. We get a lot of questions like that on social. My answer is usually, it's a bright line violation of the law if you just repost it or use the picture without that person's permission. There are varying degrees of risk depending on who it is. Are you just using their name? Are you also using their picture? Are you implying that they're a spokesperson when they're not? And so some of that risk analysis will depend on the context. That being said, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the Katherine Heigl post where Dwayne Reed posted about her coming out of their stores. They were like, oh, look, Katie Heigl shops at Dwayne Reed, and she sued them for $6 million. There was another case with Sofia Vergara. She was using a particular kind of massage at a particular kind of spa. She posted about it on her Instagram. She just said, oh, I'm here enjoying my legacy massage. They reposted it, and she sued them for $10 million for use of her likeness without her permission. There's a Kylie Jenner example along very similar lines. But Leonardo DiCaprio, for example, don't take my word for this. He seems to be a celebrity that does not care whatsoever, and people do this all the time. So, we'll work with people on that. It's generally pretty high risk. Sometimes if you ping the celebrity and say, hey, we love that picture, can we use it? They can respond on social, and we'll sometimes deem that as implied consent for purposes of the laws. We've seen certain instances where B-list celebrities will kind of bait brands, like they'll intentionally post about a brand, the brand will repost it, and then they'll say, hey, where's my $5 million? So it can be risky and should be discussed with counsel for sure. Well, anything that includes the person's name or their likeness. So if it has their social media handle, that could be deemed to be an indicia of their persona and violate the right of publicity laws. So it doesn't really matter whether it's a repost or a retweet.
So you could not just say, I spotted in the airport. You are not, we have a lot of work to do. Okay, take it all down.
I'm the bad cop on the panel, sorry.
No, but seriously, I mean, we can't just, usually what we do is seen in LAX or seen in JFK or anything along those lines. We comb through the internet and we find photos and we service them up to our people in our company because they want to. It helps when you're pitching and you're selling the brand that this one is using it or whatever. So you're saying that we can't even do that, like slap a little violator on it and saying I spotted at LAX?
So from a legal, technical perspective, it's not permissible without the person's permission.
Oh.
Obviously,
Shut
here all
down
the time,
again.
It's the best PR possible that someone's organically using the product, but if it includes their likeness, there are two claims that they have, right? First, that you use their likeness in a branding context on your page without the permission, and second, which may be less likely, that you're implying they have a connection with the brand when they don't. So it's two different courses of action.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions?
From a super non-legal standpoint, there are countless brands in the last 5 years that have grown exponentially solely on the backs of this type of sort of endorsement, non-endorsement, particularly in the luxury space, and solely on Instagram, where these are now working towards household names. So that's the non-legal side.
And literally the only thing I will add to that is that certain of these claims, like the Sofia Vergara's and the Kylie Jenners, are really in the last year or two, and I think celebrities are realizing they can bring these claims and prevail on settlements. So I think it's becoming more risky because people are getting wise to it. But obviously, it's a know the celebrity, know the brand, and should always be looked at on a case by case.
Any other questions?
Really quick as a follow-up. Would you also apply that for just standard user-generated content, right? So if someone posts a cool picture, or we have a banner at the bottom of an email that says, share, hashtag Briggs and Riley, or tag us in your photos and, be featured in the next email or whatever. So are we saying that you have to also get their express permission, even if it's just Joe Schmo down the street?
So I think express permission is, subject to interpretation. So with UGC, I'm more comfortable either commenting and saying, hey, we love your photo, can we use it? I think people see that online all the time. I rarely see complaints from users if we do that. If it's more of a campaign where you're going to repurpose the stuff off of social, so let's say it's a Twitter campaign, you want to feature stuff in a gallery on your website, or if it's really good, you want to feature it in out of home or a print ad, then usually I say, post it with some kind of terms and conditions. We put those together all the time too. So, for example, post with hashtag XYZ in order to submit to our campaign terms and conditions here. And then if the hashtag is sufficiently unique, usually I advise it's not just the brand name, it's something like brand name submission or name of campaign, then you're reasonably sure that by posting the picture, the person intended for it to be submitted. So that's usually a lower risk, but it's good to have something.
And to add to that as well, a great way to interact and ask for permission and to make sure it's safe that you're able to use it is to go on their photo or DM them and ask them if you're allowed to use it and repurpose it on your social media channels, and then be sure to give credit to them when you do reuse it, so it's not just a blank photo and people think it's your content, but you have to make sure it's attributed to that person. Any other questions? Celia?
So this is for Alexa. I have a question for you about, one of the things that we struggle with is, when we talked about this a little earlier, and one of my questions was, how long does it take, right, to until you realize that your influencer is actually influencing? And I'd just love to hear from you sort of what you would consider to be like best practices. You've had your greatest success with X brand because you were involved with them for 2 months, 3 months, original content programming, brand stories that you co-collaborated with them on, things of that nature, because, as I said earlier, we're now into 2019. I'm done for 2018, 2019. So what can we, look forward to from that perspective? Is it, let's engage someone for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, make you part of the collaboration? What are your best practices?
First and foremost, I think relevancy to the influencer is just so important. How specific is this campaign a fit to the influencer? If it's a suitcase, like if this influencer is always traveling and taking pictures outside the airport in their luggage, like this is going to be perfect for them, and their audience is really going to resonate. One of the things I've been seeing a lot more and that I really like is the use of Instagram stories. I find that especially with all the changes with the algorithm, the people who are looking at your stories are really your most engaged fans. And I know for me, my engagement rate on my stories has been better than my posts because of the algorithm, and I see people, swiping up and clicking through. And in terms of timing, I recently worked with a brand where they had me promote something, a single campaign once a week for 3 weeks, like one story a week for 3 weeks, and I had never seen that before, and I thought that was a really great tactic on their end. Because why post something, or why post 3 ads in a row when you can, for the same price, have them be spread out within 3 weeks? I thought that was really neat. And for me, I liked it too, because I thought it was effective. It gave me an opportunity to create 3 very different types of content. The views were higher, the engagement was higher. I thought that was very effective, and I think that's something brands can consider, if they want to do stories, to consider staggering them out. I think it kind of sticks much better, yeah.
Any other questions? Laura, did you have a question?
Well, not a question, but a question for each one of our panelists. I was going to say, if, as we near the end of our day, if there's one really good tip that you can, each of you, I'll let you go down the road, can offer everybody in this room, and I think we have 12 or 13 people who are watching us on YouTube now, when it comes to influencer marketing, whether it's what you think the next great trend is after Instagrammable food, I don't know, that people should look out for, one really good legal tip, one great idea for when you're looking to find influencers, just so that everyone could have a really good takeaway from this.
I think I would have to say just the importance of building relationships. I think from the influencer and the brand side, I can't stress that enough, how important it is and how versatile the influencer can be, the PR firm can be in terms of the content you create, in terms of their willingness to do things for you, and vice versa. In terms of FTC guidelines, I kind of think it just goes the whole way. Just building those strong relationships and finding unique ways to integrate the influencer into the campaign, have them become part of the campaign. There are just so many different ways and so much more you can do, and can just be so much more successful if you have those long-term relationships. I think that's really, for me, it's been so important. So.
I think for me, it's really, don't underestimate the importance of monitoring influencers. The contractual provisions are important, but your contracts could be as detailed as can be, and if you're not looking at what your influencers are actually doing, you could still be subject to liability. And I think that includes a real awareness of how to make disclosures on Instagram and Snapchat stories, and all the new media that's evolving. I'm obviously available for questions and can discuss that with any of you at any point, but I think having an awareness and a monitoring program in place is really important.
Yeah, I'll go back to building relationships. As best you can, build relationships with these folks, have an eye toward the future, a longer term relationship. You can always fire them if they don't work out after a couple months. But when they see that you're invested in the relationship, when they see that you value what they do and are interested in their opinions around content creation and distribution and endorsement, which is really sort of the three things that we aim to achieve, then things go a lot smoother. And then try to get out of the way. Just let them do what they do best. I've seen numerous campaigns, sort of be killed before they even reach the light of day because they've been micromanaged to death around, essentially, at the end of the day, the copy's been written for them. The photo or video has been art directed by the client, and they've been left with hitting the send button. It would have been, or the post button, it would have been much more powerful for the client to just create a Facebook post themselves and buy an audience there. So trust them, work with them, and as best you can, cover off on the important legal bits, but move out of the way.
Laura, any last minute tips?
Have the last word? No. Just for everybody to know, there was a really great article in Travel Weekly magazine, may have been last week or the week before, by our friend Michelle Barron, all about influencer marketing in the travel world. So if you haven't read it yet, it's very long. She interviews some really good people. She talks about problems some hotel chains have had with fake followers. Really, I actually have to write to her to thank her for that. It was one of the best in-depth pieces I've seen in a trade magazine. So take a look at that, Travel Weekly magazine, Michelle Barron on influencer marketing in the travel world. And this keeps changing over and over again. So I want to thank our panelists, 3 really good perspectives. I want to thank everybody who contributed their time today, and thank you, Andy and your team at FinPig. You guys are so smart at what you do. I have 10 pages of notes of new things that I want to do, and I think some of my clients probably do too. And to everybody who's stayed with us on YouTube and people who sent questions via text and Twitter, we really appreciate the engagement. you know, part of what we do at LDPR, we love what we do, we love getting PR for our clients, but we also like adding value, both internally to our staff and externally to our clients. And, you know, the industry keeps changing, and if we could try and stay 3 steps ahead of it by partnering with people like Thin Pig and having access to all this information, then we're all doing our jobs that much better. So thank you all, and thank you everybody for all your time today. And thank you, Jackie, who's done such a great job organizing this. And thank you, Sequoia, who's monitoring everything over there, who's done a great job. And I think, and that's right. And thank you to the Dominic Hotel, which is fabulous. If anybody wants to see a room or take a tour, you can do that afterwards. I checked out of my room, or I would take you all up to my room and see my beautiful view. I stayed over last night. Any chance I can, I'd like to stay here. So thank you for the great food and the great room. And isn't it nice to be in a meeting room that has all this natural light? I mean, I love it. I love it. And the bathrooms are really nice, too. Anyway, so thank you, everybody, and to be continued.